Baron Fedra spotted a coach departing the new local lands, displaying Duchess Elia's coat of arms. He'd been scratching his head, trying to figure out who'd been backing me all along. And right then, he figured he had his answer. Some powerful archmage pulling strings from the shadows. He kicked himself big time for burning bridges with me. Right after my old man passed away. This time, he didn't show up to patch things up himself. Instead, he dragged his daughter Lena, my ex-fiancée, to handle the dirty work. Lena and I used to be childhood sweethearts. Back when we were kids, she promised to marry me. But somewhere down the line, she shifted and grew totally distant. When her dad officially called off our engagement, she didn't say a word, just kept dead silent. Now, Fedra wanted her to win me back. He was dead sure that if she became my wife, and I eventually claimed the title of Count, his entire household would ride my coattails to the top. He relied heavily on his daughter's good looks. Lena gazed out of the carriage window, recalling an afternoon from years ago. She had attempted to put Yahello in her place, who was nothing but a mere servant to her, only for me to shield Yahello and take the brunt of it. Lena had felt completely vilified. She could never grasp why I valued a maidservant far more than my very own bride-to-be. She hated being there, fully aware. She was just a pawn for her father to play, yet she had zero choice. I understand, father. I was tackling paperwork at my desk when Yahello entered, seeming rather anxious. Before she could speak, a voice called out from the entryway. It's me, Linwei. It's been a while. Lena offered a flawless curtsy, gathering her elegant gown without a single crease. Her light golden locks shimmering, and gorgeous face looked just as I remembered. Running into her again was totally unexpected. What brings you here? I asked, my voice flat. No warmth, no trace of nostalgia. I just wanted to visit my childhood buddy. After all, technically speaking, we're still engaged. The arrangement had never been officially called off. Both families kept quiet about it to save face. No, we are not. Your dad completely ruined our family's ties. You know that. If you want a friendly chat, fine. But bring up the fiancé thing one more time, and I'll have security throw you out. I'm truly sorry for my father's actions, Linwei. I shook my head. No need to apologize. You were merely a pawn for his political marriage. You didn't even care for me back when I was a baron's son, did you? I offered a bitter smile. That particular afternoon was burned into my mind. The moment she went after Yahello, I had stepped right between them, and the pure panic on Yahello's face was something I could never forget. Yahello wasn't just some servant to me. She was my actual family. Honestly, the only real family I had left in this world. Anyone trying to harm my people was an enemy to me. Lena finally spots Yahello standing right behind me. Even she had to acknowledge how stunning Yahello was. As the daughter of a baron, Lena's sole advantage over Yahello was her noble title. Definitely not her looks and not her warmth. Must be nice, Lena murmured softly. You're still treating your maid like royalty. If that's the only reason you stopped by, you can hit the road. Deep letdown filled her gaze. After all this time, absolutely nothing had changed. She was the one who should have been his partner. She was the one he was supposed to protect. He was always the maid who stood behind me, the very one I constantly protected. She didn't say another word, just stared at me quietly. Head maid, please escort Miss Lena to a guest room. Make sure she has everything she needs. It's not like I was going to dump a baron's daughter straight onto the streets. That'd just look petty and trash my reputation. Still, if it ever came down to my public image versus Yahello, I'd choose Yahello in a heartbeat. Once Lena left, I reached over and took Alilu's hand. She had been shaking a little bit. Feeling my warmth, she finally started to relax. No matter what happened, I'd always have her back. That was a vow I'd made to myself ages ago. And Lena showing up again didn't change a thing. 10 massive crates were lined up neatly in my courtyard, each stamped with the Far East Trading Company's logo. Every single box held 10,000 of Norn's gold coins. That's 100,000 total, all pocketed from Bigland's weapons sales. My mines were basically a bottomless cash cow. It certainly looked like a massive fortune. But once I crunched the numbers, my buzz faded. Just signing up 1,000 new troops takes 100 gold pieces just for the enlistment bonuses, and getting them geared up in full iron plate, even with the trading company cutting me a deal, costs around 10,000 gold per 1,000 soldiers. Barding for the horses was even crazier. Toss in casualty compensation, day-to-day costs, and raw supplies for Bigland's smithy. And this stash wasn't going to last very long. Sure, 2,000 troops sounded like a massive crowd, but it really wasn't anywhere near enough. Besides, these were just standard foot soldiers. No elite squats, no sorceros, and 0 griffin riders. Those cost a literal king's ransom. I seriously needed more cash flow. I doubted Zaluk would try raiding Rima again this year, considering we'd already seized their plains and woodlands. If a new military operation kicked off, it would likely zero in on Yade instead. Either way, it wasn't my problem at the moment. Once I wrapped up the day's paperwork, I made my way over to the slave market. The chubby broker had dropped me a line that morning, saying some fresh inventory had just arrived. He was standing out front, smirking like I was a walking jackpot. He'd caught wind of the Far East trading companies, coin-filled wagons pulling straight into my manor. To a guy like him, I wasn't some nobleman. I was just a massive pile of cash. Out in the courtyard, the transport wagons, packed tight with captives, were having their dark tarps yanked away. The sight totally caught me off guard. These weren't humans. They were actual lizard men. Dark gray and jet black scales covered most of their skin, and while their limbs matched human proportions, every single one had a long, scaly tail, on top of the standard slave collars. Heavy iron restraints bound their wrists and ankles. Checking their stats, the males boasted some crazy numbers. One dude even reached an 89 in combat with hardened scales, plus a partial magic resistance rated as an A-. The females weren't quite as strong, but they were still tough. I inquired about the extra chains. It's that magic resistance, my lord, he noted. A few can actually fight off the collar spell. To a certain extent, the shackles just give us a little peace of mind. Fair point. If I managed to whip these lizard men into shape, they would make for one hell of an army. With over 200 of them, it wasn't going to be cheap. How much? The heavy merchant's eyes lit up. 3,000 gold pieces a pop, if you buy solo. Take the whole lot, and it's 50 grand. He went on to say, they were raided from a clan down in the southern continent, right along the edge of Beastman territory. Just running the job set him back 20,000 in out-of-pocket costs. So honestly, 50,000 was a massive bargain. His personal way of backing my potential. A Viscount about to level up to a count, ruling over every single commercial tariff in this realm. Talk about a savvy merchant. I strolled past the enclosures, checking out every single one. Most of those lizard men just stare me down with pure rage. One even bared his teeth with a nasty hiss. But shut up real quick once my guard flashed his blade. Right off the bat, their raw attributes genuinely justified the price tag, and breaking them in wouldn't be an issue at all. Those slave binders would easily keep them behaved. That's when I caught a glimpse of her in the back. A female lizard man sporting dazzling, snow-white scales. She was a total contrast to the rest of the pack, who were just dull gray and black. There was this striking elegance about her. The other females noticeably kept their distance from her, steering completely clear despite the tight, overcrowded space. Reina, Marshall, 1.08, Strategy, 40, Loyalty, 0. Talents, none. Bloodline, White Dragon. Skills, Dragon Scale Hardening. Dragon Spirit Blessing, rating, S-tier Dragon. Mixed in with this whole batch of lizard men, one actually possessed the ancestral blood of a white dragon. Dragons are the absolute apex predators across this entire continent. The truly top-tier ones can even alter their physical size whenever they want, which leads to them occasionally crossbreeding with other races. So, one of Reina's actual parents had to be a genuine white dragon. Gulping down my absolute thrill, I locked in my choice right then and there. I'm buying the whole lot. Should I send a courier over to your estate for the coin? Or are you planning to have it shipped here? The chubby merchant's face lit up with absolute delight. Your word is totally solid in my book, Viscount. We've cut deals together in the past. Just remit the payment whenever it suits you. Or just give me the word and I'll swing by to pick it up. With that, he signaled his security detail over. Transfer all of these slaves to the Viscount's property. Right away, I managed to gather Reina's backstory from the other lizard men. As an abandoned infant, she was brought up by her grandmother, the clan's sole mage, a highly respected and exceptional figure. The old woman always assured her that those white scales signified innocence and beauty. But 3 years ago, her grandmother stepped out one afternoon and never returned, left without her guardian. Reina finally learned the harsh truth. White scales actually signaled an ill omen. The space others maintained wasn't out of reverence. It was driven by dread and revulsion. She essentially became the village scapegoat. Local kids would rough her up just for kicks. She scraped by on nothing but rabbits and wild greens. So when the Norris troops plundered their settlement and bound everyone into slavery, she didn't shedding any tears. Honestly, she felt relieved. Watching her former tormentors meet that exact same fate offered her a strange, sort of poetic justice. Once the maids finished cleaning her up, she turned out to be absolutely gorgeous, in contrast to the typical lizard folk, whose faces are completely hidden by scales. Reina appeared remarkably human. Palish scales only dusted her midriff and arms, leaving the rest of her skin entirely smooth, with her delicate, porcelain-like traits. Vibrant crimson hair cascading down to her hips, and ruby eyes paired with tiny, shimmering white scales on her ears. She was striking. 2 little nubs on her brow. Looked like tiny horns just starting to bud. Even Alilu couldn't pull his eyes away. They actually had to slice a gap in the maid uniform to accommodate her thick tail, but once she was fully styled, she looked utterly breathtaking. I relocated the 200 lizard men onto some fallow ground, just outside the estate premises, an overgrown orchard. My sentries then assisted them in putting up timber cabins. The lizard men busted their tails, building more than 200 shelters in just a day and a half. I drafted the males into military drill, while letting the females choose whatever work they liked. The guys signed up for duty without much fuss. They were already used to slave collars anyway. Besides, as long as I held up my end on pay and rations, their loyalty would naturally follow. My own people, though, were pissed. The citizens of Norwich absolutely despised non-humans. Treating lizard men as expendable meat shields was totally fine, but I granted them land, proper housing, and equal rights. The trash talk got so loud that my butler stepped in to warn me. If the king found out that I was acting like some radical aristocrat, pampering subhumans, I'd go from the most promising viscount to a disgraced outcast in a heartbeat. No business deals, no economic growth, and no building an army. So, I made a public statement. The lizard men were merely my property, not local residents. They wouldn't be staying for good, or getting any citizenship rights. This setup was just temporary training barracks. My word carried major weight around here, because I'd always delivered on my promises. The crowds cooled down, but it totally frustrated me. The racism in this place ran way deeper than I ever expected. I honestly wanted these lizard men to put down roots, multiply, and build a dedicated community. But that just wasn't going to fly in Norwich. At least, not yet. Reyna adapted to castle life pretty quickly. She handled cleaning, poured tea whenever Lilo was swamped, and generally kept on her best behavior. She clearly had some mixed emotions regarding her fellow lizard men. They used to torment her, yet what little affection she'd known in her life had also come from them. One day, I brought up casually, "Reyna, you're actually pretty tough. Wait, don't you have a combat score of 108? That's even higher than Norl's." I already knew the truth, though. She confessed to smashing a bunch of plates back when she first started out as a maid, simply because she couldn't control her own power. The head may have been surprisingly cool about it. "Follow me over to the training grounds." Akshin jogged right over the moment he spotted me. He peeked over my shoulder, looking pretty let down when his eyes landed on Reyna. Instead of bite, "Akshin, how's the training coming along?" "I never slack off, my lord. I'm completely ready for battle. Anytime." "Awesome. Then let's do a little sparring match. Face my mate. If you manage to win, I'll knight you on the spot." His eyes instantly lit up. He glanced toward Reyna. Short, scrawny, and barely coming up to his chin. Easy money. No backing out now. I'll take it easy on her, though. She looks pretty fragile. The soldiers crowded around, laughing and throwing jeers. "Let her use both hands, Captain. Otherwise, it's just embarrassing." Anchor watched the whole thing with amusement, figuring his brother would walk away with an easy win. Reyna was just an undersized, untrained lizard man varying up against a seasoned warrior. I gave Reyna's shoulder a gentle pat. "Want to take him on?" "You really don't have to if you don't feel like it." She gave a calm nod. This human seemed pretty strong, but he was basically on par with the folks back in her village. Nothing out of the ordinary. "Master, do you want me to beat him?" "Duh, obviously. Win this, and you'll never have to work as a maid again. You can literally do whatever you want." A spark flashed in her eyes. The dragon blood coursing through her veins yearned for power, a whole lot more than it ever cared about folding clothes. He charged ahead at absolute full throttle, aiming to deliver a swift chop right to the back of her neck. Reyna just stood there completely frozen, like a deer caught in headlights. He smirked, tasting victory already. But then, a pale hand flashed out and clamped onto his left arm. The world flipped, and he slammed hard into the dirt. A flawless shoulder throw. Then, absolute silence. Akshin was left completely stunned, with no clue what just hit him. Who knew that tiny frame packed such a massive punch? "Well, Akshin," I chimed in, cutting through the quiet. "Looks like you totally blew your shot at knighthood. Don't go saying I never gave you a chance. Go around the battlefield next time." "Understood, my lord." He pushed himself up, brushed off the dust, and offered a deep bow to both Reyna and me, a true Norris. Out here, raw strength is the only thing that earns respect. Reyna's pale scales were flaring open and closed across her arms, venting faint trails of steam that always went down whenever she got hyped up. Catching me staring, she blushed hard from embarrassment and quickly scrambled to hide behind my back. I ended up setting Reyna up with her own custom training routine. After the way she handled action, it was clear she had serious combat chops. And I figured with the right guidance, she could really crush it at the gladiator tournament. Down the line, Vadi watched the whole thing unfold with a growing fascination. She'd been keeping tabs on how I kept scouting top-tier talent, one prodigy after another, and from slave auctions, no less. She just couldn't wrap her head around how I kept getting this lucky. Honestly, she was starting to view me as some sort of chosen savior, blessed by destiny itself. She had zero suspicion that I was actually a transmigrator, so I guess I've been doing a killer job of blending right in. I carried myself just like a proper Norrance aristocrat, never once letting any Earth slang slip out. Even the locals around here insisted. I'd always been this way since I was a kid. Truth be told, I've been playing it safe ever since Biddy showed up, because her status screen proved she was a world hopper as well. Her favorability score toward me sat at 30. Nothing crazy, but favor operates way differently than loyalty. At 30, we were safely in good friends territory, which was precisely my game plan. Foster just enough rapport so that if things ever hit the fan, she might just bail me out. Well, I had some downtime. After finishing up the paperwork, I racked my brain trying to figure out how to make some cash. As just an average guy from Earth, I possessed zero practical engineering know-how. I couldn't purify salt, construct water mills, or pull off any of those typical, cliché transmigrative stunts. To make matters worse, alcohol distillation was already a thing here because of alchemy. In fact, the method had spread to both Rima and Norrance ages ago. So much for that brilliant idea. But then, something caught my eye. This world had butter and basic treats, like fruit jam and pudding, yet nobody had whipped up whipped cream. If I could pull off cream-filled bread, I'd have a luxury product that high society would lose their minds over. Granted, eggs and milk were high-end items around here, meaning only the wealthy could actually afford it. But rich clienteles meant I could charge premium rates. I summoned Yahello to the kitchen. She fetched some eggs, milk, and butter from her little homestead. After blending and whisking until my arms felt completely dead, a bowl of fluffy, whipped cream finally materialized. Drizzling a bit of honey in, "I'm calling this look a cream," I announced. Gathering a dollop on my fingertip, I held it out for her to try. She hesitated bashfully before licking it clean. Her eyes instantly lit up. "Young master, this is absolutely amazing." I smeared a generous portion on a bread and passed it over. The pairing was an absolute winner. Any girl with a sweet tooth would definitely fall head over heels for this. We gorged ourselves, and then I got down to business. Thank goodness, the recipe doesn't leave the castle walls. Only Aquina and the maids are allowed to know. Everyone has to keep it completely under wraps. She nodded, fully grasping the gravity of the situation. I had total faith in our maids, seeing as their loyalty stats were all well over 80. They had next to no interaction with outsiders. Plus, I'd always treated them right. With Yahello and Aquina, my top confidants, keeping an eye on things, the secret was totally safe. Here was my plan. Whip up a whole batch of cream and throw a massive gala. Specifically, my 17th birthday bash. Any aristocrat looking to get on my good side would be there, and I'd debut the cream during the feast. Once they got a taste of it, they'd be practically begging to do business. I sent out invites to every local noble around, as well as all the major merchant guilds. Well, everyone except Baron Fedra. The turnout was incredible. Most nobles decided to come. There were barons, viscounts, even a few counts, and maybe a couple of marquises. Dukes wouldn't show up for a simple viscount's birthday, and the king obviously wouldn't bother, either. Still, this was plenty to work with. Count Pharaoh took a very particular interest upon receiving his invite. He'd already provided me with 300 chargers, but we hadn't really grown closer since then. Now, he wondered, was Duchess Alia pulling the strings here? Whether she was involved or not. He'd show up for sure, and he'd bring a lavish present. As far as he could tell, most peers still hadn't caught on to my ties with Alia. He still had the upper hand, and he fully meant to keep it. Welcome, the esteemed Baron Weiss. The festivities are just about to start. Please step inside. My steward welcomed each arriving aristocrat with a bow, and accepted their offerings. The gifts alone took up half a storeroom. The crowd completely blew past my expectations. Tons of barons and viscounts, a solid number of counts, and even some marquises from the left-wing faction. My butler was floored. I was merely a viscount, yet so many heavy-hitting nobles were showing me respect. It totally made sense, though. Following the autumn campaign disaster, I was the only one who actually looked good. If I got promoted to count, even dukes and the king might show up to my parties. The marquises only came, partly because they'd scored new lands nearby during the recent reshuffling, and partly to scope out if they could recruit me into the left wing. Camp. Baron Fedra crashed the party. I hadn't sent him an invite, and he knew it. He had his own attendant announce him at the entrance. My supervisor, clueless about the bad blood between us, went to double-check with Yahello. Yahello remembered it all perfectly. Oxiu getting booted out, the sheer disrespect. Yet she relayed my words flawlessly. Baron Fedra, our master, claims he forgot to mail your invitation. He sincerely apologizes for the slip-up, and will make it up to you in person. Once the gala ends. Perfection. Fedra's face twitched. He caught on to the play. I had recognized his arrival out in the open, while dropping a clear hint that the snub was on purpose. But with so many highborns watching, he couldn't make a scene. I hadn't shut him out, so he really had nothing to whine about. I granted him entry because this gathering hosted nearly a third of all Norn's high society. Shaming a baron right here would just make me seem petty and arrogant. I was there to get things done. Weapons, cream, and trade deals. My public image had to be flawless. Had I let my feelings take over and shut him out, every noble would start digging for dirt on me. Even though Fedra was the one who crossed me first. First impressions tend to stick. I wasn't about to give him that leverage. Once the guests had all gathered, I walked up the steps to speak to the crowd. I kept my speech brief. Thanks for coming. Welcome to my birthday. Nothing groundbreaking. The nobles actually liked that. I didn't show any nerves. While speaking before so many powerful figures, a few offered knowing smiles, of course. The guy who had raided George Fortress wasn't someone easily rattled. Yahello hung on every single word. This was her young master's big moment, and she wasn't missing a beat. Then, I invited everyone to take their seats and announced that I'd set up a surprise. First up was roasted venison from the local woods. Golden and incredibly fragrant. It was well cooked, and the barons were impressed. But the counts and higher ranks looked bored. Just standard party food. Next, I signaled the maids to bring out the cream bread. White and fluffy. Dollops of something totally unknown topped the fresh slices. Confused glances immediately rippled through the room. What exactly is this? Guildmaster Wise asked first. Makes sense, given how much business we'd done together. And even he had never laid eyes on anything like it. Allow me to present Luca cream. A signature delicacy from the Luca domain. It's sweet and rich, so please dig in. The aristocrats traded looks. A local delicacy from Leeward? Back when this area was called St. Martin, it never had a single product worth mentioning. Always down for a taste test. Wise took the first bite. His expression instantly shifted to pure delight. Right after that, everyone else dug in. The verdict was absolutely unanimous. Fluffy, sugary cream on top of fluffy bread. It was a total novelty and flat-out irresistible. Viscount Linway, this specialty of yours is downright incredible. A marquis from the left wing declared. The moment a marquis gave it a public nod, praises started flooding in from all over the room. The merchant guild bosses kept their mouths shut, but I could practically see the wheels turning in their heads. A treat this spectacular, found only in my domain. With potential buyers all across the realm of Norrance. They were already crunching the profit margins. Everything went smoothly. Once the party wrapped up, I sent each noble home with glass jars packed with cream. As a parting gift, they gladly took them too. The stuff had clearly blown them away. Even Fedra received a single jar, even though everyone else got at least two. He didn't make a fuss, though. Just getting anything from me at all must have caught him off guard. The minute the last non-merchant noble cleared out, Guildmaster Weiss crept right up to my side. Viscount Linway, this cream of yours is seriously elite. It's just as mind-blowing as those blades you sold me. You're too kind, Weiss. It's really no big deal. If you fancy it, I'll have the staff fetch you some more. He pulled his go-to trick again. Dangling marriage setups with daughters of wealthy counts. If I agreed to side with Duke Simon's crowd, naturally, I brushed it off just like I always do. Every one of us answers to Norrance and the king. That goes for us out here on the frontier, too. I do my bit, got shot down twice now. Yet, he didn't look all that shocked. That whole political spiel was honestly just a warm-up before talking shop. Is this cream tough to whip up? He inquired. Not incredibly hard, but it's no walk in the park either. Then came his opening bid. I'll buy that recipe off you for 10,000 gold pieces. He was testing the waters. He wanted to see if I truly knew the value of what I held. Hallelujah. Fetch the guild master another 2 jars of cream. Viscount, what on earth are you? I clasped his hand with a warm grin. Come on, we're buddies. If you want cream, just say the word. No cash needed. Wise looked a bit flustered. Cut the jokes, please. I shrugged and gestured for Yahello to back off. Hey, you're the one who started joking, not me. He allowed a sigh. Fine. What sort of price did you have in mind? I held up a single finger. 100 grand. He scowled. The cream was obviously bound to be a hit. But if the production overhead ran too high, and only the high-end mighty aristocrats could afford it. He doubted he would even manage to break even. I shook my head. Try 1,000,000 Norris gold coins. His eyes practically popped out of his skull. Are you out of your mind? Unless this stuff sells in Yade and Rima, there is no way it could ever be worth that kind of money. I patted his shoulder. Have some faith. It absolutely is. But tell you what, let's do this instead. I'll hand over the recipe completely free of charge. You ensure it remains strictly confidential. And we go halves 50-50 on every single unit sold. He mulls it over. No way. A 50-50 split is far too steep when I'm footing the bill for all the ingredients. It needs to be fair and I need your word. But the supplies won't cost so much that I end up in the red. Fair enough. Making one jar takes less than a single silver piece. But to the public, we'll claim the components are incredibly scarce. A baseline cost of at least 5 gold. Then we retail every single jar for 10 gold coins. His eyes totally lit up at those profit margins. Each sale would pocket me a clean 5 gold pieces. Even at 10 gold a pop, the aristocracy could easily afford it. And tavern-going knights or adventurers could treat themselves. Every once in a while, too. Only the average farmers would be priced out. But hey, that was the plan, bleed the rich dry. Before the formula eventually gets leaked. To seal the deal, Wise and I signed a magical pact. An ancient, binding document fueled by forgotten tech. Not even a grand magus could break its spell. These contracts run about 1,000 gold pieces on the open market and are strictly reserved for high-stakes deals. The conditions? I handed over the formula. Completely free up front, with a 50-50 split on profits. Wise was sworn to absolute confidentiality. If the recipe leaked from his end, he'd owe me a cool 1,000,000 gold coins in damages. We both pricked our fingers and smeared our blood onto the parchment. It flashed for a second before settling, now binding, and set in stone. Wise smiled and held out his hand. Here's to a lucrative partnership. Viscount Linway. To a lucrative partnership. Eliela's life had always been basic. Groomed since childhood to look after me. She was told I was her whole world. She took it as gospel. As she grew up, she learned what noble households were really like. Terrible stories about lords who got their maids pregnant. At 15, old nobles with disgusting habits. The servants gossiped about endlessly. She was lucky I wasn't like that. I called her Lulu when I was happy. I always spoke gently to her. And what she remembered most was the day I stood between her and Lena. Lena, as the Baron's daughter, thought punishing a maid who got too close to her fiancé was perfectly normal. I ruined my relationship with Lena to protect Yahello. From that day on, she swore to stay by my side forever. Yahello's mother had a tragic life. A drunk noble used her and threw her out. When he sobered up, threw bits and pieces of what her mother told her. Yahello suspected her father might be someone important in the left-wing faction. She didn't care. Her mother wandered pregnant to look at territory, where my father Ryan took them in. Now, both her mother and my father were gone. We only had each other. Today should have been a happy day. I just closed a huge business deal, but something was bothering Yahello. She shook the feeling away and carried my evening tea to the study. Like always, she knocked. No answer through the crack in the door. The room was dark. She figured I'd fallen asleep at my desk. After a long day, she tiptoed in, set down the tea, and went to get a blanket. When she came back and reached for the oil lamp, out of nowhere, a candle sparked to life right on my desk. Yahello, get over here, I muttered under my breath. She stepped closer and spotted it. A lone pink candle shoved right into a slice of cream bread. Happy birthday, Yahello. She completely froze, her eyes welling up with tears. The same to you, young master. We share this exact day, after all. She'd been feeling pretty down all day long. Figuring ide tutali furuten. She kept reminding herself not to get her hopes up. But emotions rarely listen to logic. Hey, what's with the tears? You must be exhausted from hustling all day, especially on your actual birthday. No way. Backing you up is an absolute honor for Yahello. Come on, blow it out and make a wish. I've been low-key putting this together for her since we were 6. 11 years straight now, 11 wishes in total. Every single year, she'd wish for my well-being, my ultimate happiness, and for the Luca lands to flourish. And incredibly, every single one of them had manifest. So this time around, for her 17th birthday, she decided to be just a tiny bit selfish. She wished that I'd pay a bit more attention to her, hoping to carve out a special spot in my heart. Blushing furiously, she opened her eyes and cast a nervous glance my way, terrified that I might have somehow read her thoughts. Seeing my usual, unreadable expression, she finally relaxed. Meanwhile, Reina had been grinding through training. way harder than any actual soldier in my ranks. She mastered fundamental combat, moves like slashing and thrusting, and began hitting the road for runs before daybreak. Her appetite completely doubled. That white dragon lineage pumping through her left her absolutely craving a real fight. Even so, she intuitively felt that neither a human nor a lizard man could satisfy it. Drills were finally tapping into her max capabilities, yet something far deeper remained shut away. That's when Baidi approached her. The succubus empress had kept a close eye on Reina for quite some time, but today marked the very first time they spoke. Your current routine isn't doing much. Want me to show you a better shortcut? Reina's scales instantly bristled with gut-level caution. The moment Baidi drew near, she couldn't quite wrap her head around why a lizard folk and a succubus would ever have anything in common. What Reina didn't realize, however, was that Baidi shared a symbiotic pact with a legendary frost dragon. She had spotted right off the bat that Reina was no run-of-the-mill lizard folk. True dragon blood coursed through her veins. Thanks to her alliance, Baidi had mastered ancient dragon incantations and absorbed ancestral lore that would be absolutely perfect for Reina. For real, Reina didn't think twice. Growing more powerful, to return the favor had turned into a total fixation. Step a bit closer. Baidi leaned in and gently tapped Reina's brow. With a pale fingertip, an absolute flood of raw power slammed into Reina's mind, bringing vivid flashes of gliding over mountain peaks and soaring across boundless seas. Pure energy surged wildly through her veins. Every single cell inside her body felt alive. The second Baidi pulled her hand back. A pair of pristine white horns burst forth from the tiny ridges on Reina's forehead. Her draconic legacy was finally waking up, armed with these inherited ancestral memories. Reina's skills were bound to skyrocket. Frost dragons and white dragons shared a very close lineage, making this ancient lore a seamless match. Meanwhile, Baidi's curse was already halfway broken. While staying quietly in my manor, assisting Reina in awakening her dragon abilities was just her way of clearing a bit of the debt she felt she owed me. Wise moved fast. Barely a week after receiving my recipe, he'd whipped up over 10,000 jars of cream. He took my advice and tested various sugars, but conceded that honey delivered the finest flavor. Priced at 10 gold coins a jar, and with production costs under a single silver, it was pretty much pure profit. Our only real hassle was tracking down enough milk and eggs. He scooped up every supply in the area, then covered his tracks by throwing in tons of completely random vegetables and fruits so no one could reverse engineer the recipe from his shopping habits. Clever guy. The groundwork I laid at the birthday celebration worked like a charm. Aristocrats who'd gotten a taste were already hooked, while the ones who missed out were dying to see what the hype was about. The entire batch of 10,000 jars sold out in just 7 days. That brought in a cool 100,000 gold coins in revenue. My 50% cut came to 50,000 gold in a single week. To put that into perspective, the entire annual revenue of the Far East Trading Company was only around 1 million gold. We just cleared a tenth of their yearly business in under a week. You bet. Wise finally got why I demanded 1 million gold pieces when he initially tried to buy the recipe from me. At this pace, 1 million was a total steal. Still, he seemed perfectly happy with our 50-50 split. A smart merchant knows when to quit while he's ahead. Meanwhile, over at the Magic Academy, events I'd only find out about later were taking place. Elia was having some afternoon tea out in the Academy Gardens. Strawberry and blueberry cream buns, pudding slathered in cream, and black tea. My creation had already completely taken over the capital's dessert scene. She called Saruka over to tease her about how far we'd come since her last visit. Saruka blushed furiously and tried to change the subject. Give this a shot, Elia said, passing her some of the treat. It's a local specialty from the Luka territory. Saruka looked bewildered. She had no clue my fief even had a specialty. Just one bite of that cream bun made her eyes pop. Honestly, no girl with a sweet tooth stood a chance. Your Lin Wei must be raking it in by now. Elia noted. He's pretty sharp. No wonder covering your tuition is a breeze for him. Then, Elia's vibe shifted ever so slightly. Saruka, there's something you need to realize. You're a phenomenally gifted mage. I never want to see you stray down the wrong path. Because if you do, I won't pull any punches. Saruka was totally lost. Professor? I haven't messed with any dark magic. Elia merely offered a smile. I know. Just look at this as a friendly bit of advice. What Saruka failed to wrap her head around, and what actually had Elia deeply concerned, was the future. Humans simply don't last as long as beast folk. Saruka, carrying the blood of the cat tribe, could go on living for centuries. Down the line, bound by fate, I would wither and pass away while Saruka remained in her prime. Elia had witnessed it firsthand. When a mighty individual loses the one they hold dearest, the urge to turn to taboo sorcery, just to defy death, is real. The urge to resurrect someone gets to be too much. She'd already been forced to purge her ranks once in her lengthy existence, and she absolutely never wanted a repeat performance. Whoa, Reyna, you sprouted horns. I stared right at those shiny, snow-white dragon horns on her head with total fascination. They were roughly the length of a finger, flaring up just a bit like miniature bull horns. Pairing them with her soft features, she finally had the look of a real-deal dragon girl. Her voice was barely a whisper. She was terrified that I'd find her repulsive. After all, a horned lizard man just didn't add up. Plus, she was already burdened with those cursed white scales. Mind if I touch him? The horns felt surprisingly warm and smooth, completely different from deer antlers or standard cattle horns. It felt like plunging my hand into a heated bath. In the crisp, chilly air of spring, the feeling was totally addictive. I just couldn't keep my hands off them, until wisps of steam actually began drifting from her scales, and her whole face flushed bright red. I let go, though I didn't really want to. Then I pulled up her stats and nearly hit the floor. Reyna, Martial, 48. Strategy, 60. Loyalty, 100. Talents, White Dragon Bloodline, Dragon Scale Hardening, Dragon Spirit Blessing, Frost Dragon Inheritance. Ratings. Her martial stat had skyrocketed by 40 points. Her strategy was up by 20, and she'd unlocked Frost Dragon Inheritance as a brand new talent. White dragons and frost dragons were definitely cousins, but I couldn't wrap my head around how she'd tapped into a frost dragon's legacy. Still, it didn't look like a bad thing at all, so I decided not to overanalyze it. Reyna, how would you like to become a sworn knight of the Luca territory? I clasped her hand, looking completely serious. She just stared back, totally dazed. Reyna's on board, and what's more, I need you to enter the gladiator games next month. Would you do that for me? Look, if you're not up for it, I won't force you. Consider just a tiny favor. For a fellow member of the Luca house, Reyna's totally down, zero hesitation. She got exactly what that crest meant to my folks. I'd pawned our family heirloom to keep our lands afloat, and now she had a shot at winning it back. She really wanted to square up for all I'd done for her. Cut to 2 weeks later. The initial payout from the cream venture finally rolled in, 20 crates, 10 grand a pop, making it 200,000 gold coins overall. And that's just from the very first payout cycle. With cash like this, I could finally build the army I required. I put action, an anchor right on top of boosting our guard, up to 5,000 troops. That ran about 200,000 for drafting, gear, and basic rations. I picked up another 700 Northern Chargers via the Far East Trading Company, getting a sweet deal at 200 gold apiece. Perks of our partnership in the cream trade that brought my mounted forces to a solid 1,000 riders. The remaining funds went straight into heavy plates, chainmail, and armor for the mounts. Big Land could finally take a breather from hammering out blades. To field 5,000 elite infantrymen, 1,000 horsemen, and a high-tier resident sorcerer. This was the real deal, the kind of muscle account wields, maybe even outclassing a few marquises. On top of that, Nair and Cell just confirmed that a handful of commoners I'd sent over actually possessed genuine magical talent. Breeding wizards is a pricey endeavor, but funding wasn't an issue anymore. My cream business was raking in 100,000 gold coins a week, and that was just inside Noritz. Once it hits Rima and Yade, those figures will skyrocket. In a quiet room inside my castle, Biddy sat by herself with a jar of Luca cream. She'd finally given it a shot. After Alolo shared some during lunch, just one bite, and 300 years of memories instantly rushed back. A soft afternoon breeze, a university campus, just an ordinary girl snacking on cream bread between classes. Long before this world, before the crown, and before all the bloodshed and betrayal, cream wasn't even a thing in this realm. Until I whipped it up, leaving only one logical conclusion. Was Lin Wei actually a transmigrate? The realization hit her like a truck. Everyone around me was outstanding. Inventing cream was way too specific to just be a fluke. She desperately wanted it to be true, craving for me to be from the exact same world she used to call home. Yet, she was also terrified of being mistaken. Ultimately, she chose to keep quiet. Even if I really was a transmigrator, what difference would it make? Setting the empty jar down, she gazed out the window. Some mysteries are better left untouched. The Eagle Gladiator Badge stands as a top-tier distinction in Noritz. You gotta brawl your way through every rival. and conquer the entire tourney to claim it, presented directly by the king himself. While any citizen can sign up, aristocrats usually take the win, thanks to their superior training resources. And elite fighters. Magic is strictly banned in the ring, but a victory guarantees you'll catch the royals' eyes. I hopped into the coach with Reina and made tracks for the capital. No way was I missing out on this. Plenty of aristocrats were already aware that I'd previously sold an eagle emblem to the royals, and that's likely why I was stuck as a mere viscount, despite capturing a pair of Rima royals myself. If Reina can pull off a solid run in this tourney, I'd have a legit shot at an earldom. Reina, it doesn't matter if you win or lose. I assured her that her safety was the top priority. She gazed back at me with such earnest eyes. Deeply touched, she promised she wouldn't let me down. To be honest, it left me feeling a bit guilty, since I'm really not as noble as I look. My grandfather, Edward, once passed down a lesson that powerful lords rule their subordinates through emotion, rather than violence. Feelings are a far more formidable weapon than raw force. Taking a hard, honest look at myself, with the exception of Alulo, I've had hidden agendas with most of my followers. Then again, if I weren't in the picture, would their lives actually be any better? The arena was situated right by the capital's grandest castle. The pathways surrounding it were easily the liveliest in the entire city, packed with merchant guilds, minor nobles, paladins, and mercenaries. Clerics were stationed all over the place, prepared to patch up battered combatants for a fee. Sure, I was used to massive crowds, but Reina clearly wasn't. She shrunk away from all the intense staring and clutched the hem of my overcoat. I offered a smile and took her delicate, pale hand, which seemed to calm her nerves a bit. It's pretty funny. She's a dragon girl with a 168 combat rank, yet she actually suffers from a bit of social anxiety. My pair of elite sentries forged a path ahead, and after roughly half an hour, we finally arrived at the Colosseum gates. The sentry instantly recognized my house crest, and let's right in. The first person I ran into was Vis, who was chatting with some baron. He grinned and pulled me into a hug. Viscount Linway, I've been dying to see you. Normally, nobles just shake hands. A hug like that signals a very close relationship, almost like family. But Vis was just in a great mood, because we'd both made a killing recently. Other nobles noticed and started watching us. Vis was only a baron, but everyone knew he worked under Duke Simon, so people gave him respect. As for me, I was the new star of the kingdom, the guy who captured 2 Rima royals and invented the cream bread that was sweeping the capital. People looked at my young face and probably wondered how Baron Ryan ever produced a son like me. The arena was a huge oval, ringed with rows and rows of stone seats, stacked like a honeycomb. Nobles got cushioned spots with soft blankets. Commoners could watch too, but they sat farther back on hard stone. A baron got 1 seat, a viscount got 2, an earl 3, a marquis 5, and dukes and royals got as many as they needed. Reina sat beside me, nervous. I could feel the strange looks from the other nobles. Most of them thought she was a lizard folk, and having one sitting in the noble section raised eyebrows. Some admitted she was pretty cute for a mutant lizard, with those pure white scales, but a few openly disapproved, saying I was being improper for a noble. I didn't bother explaining. I looked over toward the duke's section and found Saruka watching me. She was dressed in white mage robes today. When our paths crossed, she flashed me a timid little smirk. That brief exchange didn't go unnoticed, though. Michelle, the guy who'd been hitting on Saruka with 0 luck, saw the whole thing. His eyes narrowed like a viper prepping to strike. I quickly broke eye contact with Saruka. We couldn't risk drawing any attention to our bond. Not in this place, and definitely not right now. For starters, I needed to become a legitimate earl, backed by the reputation and military clout to prove it. Or, Saruka would have to achieve the rank of a Grand Magic Master. Only at that point could we finally stop stressing over everyone else's opinions. Even after I looked away, I could tell she was still stealing glances at me. Her mentor, Arya, must have caught on as well, since she nudged Saruka's head and muttered, "You wouldn't want folks discovering you in Lin Wei, would you?" That phrase totally snapped Saruka out her days. Michelle, the third prince who'd been relentlessly pursuing her in vain, was already tracking us. Leaking our secret right now would only cause trouble for me. Once we all got seated, the time came to sign up for the competition. I decided not to tag along with Reina. The check-in booth was just a short walk away, and I figured it would serve as great practice for her networking skills. The receptionist took one look at Reina's uniform and assumed she was totally lost. "Hey there, mate. Are you searching for your employer? That sentry over there can help track them down." Reina went dead silent for a second, and then responded, "I'm actually here to enter the Eagle Gladiator Tournament." The attendant stood there speechless. She informed him that she was representing House Luke. As a knighted combatant, he obviously found it hard to swallow. The up-and-coming Viscount with a legendary status was deploying a servant girl into battle. Just then, a burly blade wielder named Hugo began jeering at her. That Viscount's totally lost his marbles, sending some lowborn maid into the Colosseum. "Get back to keeping your master's bed warm, little girl." See, he was backed by Duke Simon, so he wasn't afraid of anyone short of royalty. With the left-wing faction currently on top, nobody dared to cross him. Reyna's fist squeezed tight. She couldn't care less about being insulted herself. But he had badmouthed me, and that crossed the line. A massive brawl was about to pop off, right when Count Pharaoh intervened. He was a rather portly aristocrat, and his icy tones sliced through the air like frost. "Hugo, how dare you disrespect a nobleman?" Hugo attempted to laugh it off as some friendly advice, but Pharaoh shut him down instantly. "You're nothing but one of Simon's lapdogs. Don't you dare drag the Simon family name through the mud, where your corpse will be drifting in the moat by dawn." That quieted Hugo right down. But as the clerk finalized Reyna's sign-up, Hugo crept in close and muttered, "You better pray we don't cross paths out there. Little maid, I'm going to make you wish you were never born. Mark my words." Reyna didn't even spare him a glance. She simply headed off toward the competitor's lounge, tossing Pharaoh a thankful look on her way past. Pharaoh had his own motives for stepping in. He was privy to a secret. That backing me up was Arya, an absolute force to be reckoned with. He realized I'd never side with the left faction, meaning I was practically guaranteed to transform into the breakout star of a fresh alliance. And playing nice with me now promised major perks down the road. This guy was taking the whole scene in as well, breathing easy since Pharaoh had successfully de-escalated things. He was likely scratching his head, wondering why on earth I'd throw a maid into the tourney. Yet, after all the lucrative ventures we'd pulled off, he had pretty much developed a blind faith in my calls. Our partnership had racked up serious coin for the Far East Trading Company. So much so that Duke Simon dropped hints about elevating his rank from Baron to Viscount. Naturally, he was more than stoked to keep teaming up with me. Two top contenders stood out to win this year's bracket. First up was the Sovereign's Champion, a rare half-dragon, half-human beast, who had snagged the Eagle emblem 3 consecutive times, bringing tons of prestige to King Illuc XIII. The second was a ruthless hitman on Duke Reese's payroll, a former vanguard for an S-rank adventuring squad. Word on the street was he wielded a curse blade, capable of slicing right through dragonhide. The midday sun was blazing when the games finally kicked off. The opening bout featured a sword and board, adventurers squaring off against Hugo, that same warrior who had run into Reyna earlier. Though I was totally in the dark about that then, I pulled up Hugo's profile. A power level of 102, gifted in one-handed blades, defensive mastery, and sheer raw muscle. An A-tier rating meant he was the real deal. Tougher than Norrell, but still nowhere near Reyna's league. His opponent's combat score sat at a measly 60, lacking any noteworthy perks. I could already see the punchline coming. Right on cue, Hugo took the guy's head clean off. In a mere 2 passes, blood splattered everywhere, and the arena went absolutely wild. No, Rance harbors a sick obsession with bloodshed and raw power. That's just how things go in the arena. If you don't tap out quick enough, you're dead. Hugo flashed a sadistic smirk and stared directly at my section, as if he were throwing a sign my way. I couldn't quite figure out why, but his gaze gave me the creeps. The surrounding Viscounts kept hyping up his prowess, reckoning he'd easily land in the top 3. Duke Simon stroked his beard, looking totally pleased. The opening round dragged on, leaving most of the combat floor drenched in gore. Only those who threw in the towel early made it out alive. By now, I'd grown numb to the killing, yet I still couldn't stomach this brutal custom. Next up, it was Reyna's turn. She stepped out, gripping the standard issue broadsword and a circular iron buckler. I'd supplied her with Luca territory. War gear, nothing flashy, but entirely dependable. Her challenger was a knight serving an earl's house, with a combat score hovering around B-rank 70. Zero threat whatsoever. But as Reyna took the field, in her maid uniform, every single aristocrat gasped. Even the royal box fell completely silent. Whispers quickly escalated into full-blown shouting. The bleachers packed with commoners erupted in jeers, convinced she was making a mockery of this holy stage. Kingsley Luo remained quiet, though his face clearly showed he was not amused. He was definitely going to grill the sign-in officials about which house had sponsored her. The warrior facing Reyna was at least decent enough to warn her. "Hey, Little maid, if I were in your shoes, I'd forfeit right this second. This isn't some playground. Reina replied in a frosty tone. I appreciate your concern. So give it everything you've got, please. That way, you won't have any regrets. The stench of rust and blood hung heavy around her. The ground was stained pitch black from all the gore that had drenched the soil. Combat wasn't her thing, but she'd do it for my sake. The knight lunged at her, shield raised high, his blade fully prepped to run her through. Reina just stood her ground, dead still. No panic, zero fear. Only those icy crimson eyes of the final second. She brought up her shield, making the knight smirk, thinking she'd actually try to block him head-on. Except she didn't block. She dodged sideways with blinding speed, and bashed her shield right into him, like a literal battering ram. The knight was decked out in solid iron armor, but it didn't even matter. The force of the blow sent him flying across the ring. He slammed hard into the wall, knocked out cold instantly. Reina hoisted her sword to claim her win. The entire arena went completely silent for a second. Then the place erupted. A subhuman. Maid had just launched a heavily armored knight, clear across the stadium with a single arm. Every single thing the crowd had been yelling. The disses, the mocking jeers, the claims that she was insulting the sacred ring. All of it shifted into absolute astonishment. Match after match went by, and the tournament finally made it to the Sweet 16. By this time, the sun had set hours ago, and a pair of blood-red moons watched from above, almost signaling just how brutal this contest really was. Massive bonfires and lines of torches lit up the Colosseum, making it bright as day. The battles were set to drag on late into the night, until a sole victor was crowned. Reina had already wrecked 4 nights straight. To make it this far, she'd flattened every opponent with a single strike. The spectators were beginning to view her differently. She was officially terrifying now. A total wild card no one in Noran saw coming. Wagering on a sacred tournament was strictly banned, carrying a death penalty even for the aristocracy. Honestly, a ton of gamblers would have lost their shirts tonight otherwise. A deep horn bellowed, and the final 16 contenders gathered in the center ring, basking in the applause. A few rogue adventurers were already scouting the VIP boxes, hoping to catch a patron's eye. Win or lose, everyone knew the half-dragon. Hybrid had taken the crown 3 years running, and this time around, the Duke's personal hitman was in play, not to mention this unstoppable powerhouse of a maid. Reina truly stood out, the most petite brawler with the most brutal track record. Whispers were spreading through the crowd, wondering if she actually had a shot at taking down the Dragon Warrior. When the Highborn asked which house she served, the name Luke left them completely speechless. My own clout was skyrocketing. Practically every noble in Noran's knew exactly who I was by then. Then came the bracket matchups, and Lady Luck definitely had a twisted sense of humor. Hugo drew Reina for his very first match. Hugo had been absolutely crushing it too, dismantling his rivals in the most vicious ways possible, always walking out of the ring covered in blood. The fans completely ate it up. So when the board revealed Hugo versus Reina, the hype in the stadium went wild. Facing her on the sand, Hugo let out a malicious smirk. Hey, little maid, didn't I tell you to stay out of my way? I can't believe those chumps actually let you make the top 16. What? Did you sleep with them to get them to throw the match? Go inform your boss. Any master who offers up his girl to wait on other guys is just a weak, gutless wimp. He let out that nasty smirk of his. Yet Reina didn't even blink. The plating on her arms shifted a bit, with what looked like steam leaking out from underneath. Her crimson eyes burned with an even more intense fire. She couldn't care less about insults thrown at her. But disrespecting me? That was the final straw. I've never taken a life before. She muttered, her tone freezing cold. But you're dying today. Hugo kept talking trash, though I spotted his shield staying firmly up. The guy was on high alert. He knew nobody makes it this far without being lethal. He was still plotting how to block her oncoming shield strike when all of a sudden, his head was clean off his shoulders. My eyes could barely track the movement. 1 second they were squaring up. The next, Reina was shaking blood from her blade, while Hugo's head went rolling through the dirt, his gaze frozen in pure bewilderment. He checked out without ever realizing what hit him. The Colosseum fell dead silent. Suddenly, someone yelled, "That was sorcery." But before the court's head wizard could chime in, Duchess Arya cut through the noise. There was no magic used, coming from a grand magus. That settled the debate. The quiet shattered into the wildest uproar of the night. Loud cheers and whistling erupted everywhere. Now everyone saw why I'd put her in the tournament. Her power rivaled that of the Dragon Warrior, and maybe even surpassed him. Both the half-dragon and the killer gazed intently. They had only viewed each other as the real competition. Yet Reina had totally wrecked that equilibrium. The hitman quickly realized that even by pushing himself to the absolute max, he just couldn't match her pace. The dragon warrior was weighing whether his dragon armor could hold up against her iron sword. He was pretty sure they would, given that her blade lacked any magical buffs. The red dragon blood in his veins was pumping hard. He could already visualize taking her head and bringing that trophy back to the king. The Dragon Man crushed Duke Reese's operative during the semifinals. The assassin ended up losing his right arm. His legendary enchanted dirk couldn't even scratch those draconic scales. The dragon warrior, Galen, licked the blood off his lips, looking for more. I pulled up his stats, a combat rating of 148, featuring unique perks in Dragon Scale, Hardening, and Red Dragon's Might. An A+ rank overall, which is weaker than Reina. But those buffs meant she wouldn't coast through this. Like before, since Reina's actual unique traits, outside of her Frost Dragon legacy, had barely ever kicked in. The moment they faced off in the ring, Galen caught a scent, the aroma of a white dragon. "Give me a name, little white dragon," Reina replied. "I'm actually just a lizard folk." "Are you a lizard folk as well? I've never run into a red one. Did you mutate too?" She was dead serious. Galen just gaped at her, totally stunned. Sure, he was a red dragon hybrid, not a pure blood. But he absolutely hated being grouped with lizard folk. Back before he had proved his worth, people used to make that exact blunder, and he had faced endless mockery because of it. "You've really pissed me off, little white dragon. I'm gonna rip you to shreds and eat your flesh," he snarled. He lunged forward with terrifying velocity, leaving a mere blur where he had just been standing. Reina managed to throw up her shield just in time. Sparks flew wildly from the massive collision, and the iron buckler was nearly ripped right in half, completely trashed after just a single clash. The sheer impact left her hands feeling totally numb. Tossing the shield aside, she knew blocking wasn't her strong suit anyway. Agility was. She blitzed forward, outstripping even Galen's pace, blinking right behind him in a split second. Her blade slashed across his back, but those dragon scales of his were insanely durable. Even though Big Lon had crafted her weapon to far exceed standard quality, it managed nothing more than a superficial scratch. Any ordinary sword would have shattered on impact. They traded blow after blow in a relentless, high-speed chase. All around the Colosseum, the audience was losing its mind. No one had ever survived this many rounds against Gavin before. The aristocracy looked on in awe. The royals, including King Xylic the 13 himself, kept their eyes glued firmly on Reina. Next to the hideous-looking Galen, the beautiful demi-human maid was way more captivating. She was a killer fighter and real easy on the eyes. A few lords were already whispering that she'd make a far better prize than the dragon brute. After more than a dozen fierce passes, a sudden shift occurred within Reina. An intense heat coursed through her veins, and a dormant power welled up from deep within. I caught a glimpse of a faint, white dragon phantom, shimmering behind her for a brief instant. The dragon's spirit blessing. I had never actually seen her unique trait trigger until now. Pale scales began spreading fast over her arms and face, while the small horns on her brow visibly elongated. Pure battle fury blazed in her eyes, and there was no holding it back anymore. Galen's dragon scales bristled instantly. His ancient dragon blood was screaming alarms. Whatever Reina had just morphed into, she was way out of his league. Before he could even blink, she plunged her shattered blade right into his chest. The weapon infused with that insane power shattered his dragon armor like cheap glass. Then she clocked him right in the face, knocking him cold. Reina won, and the arena went wild. The Eagle Gladiator Championship title finally belonged to the Luca family. She hadn't killed Gavin, just put him asleep. Honestly, the only person she took out in the whole tourney was Hugo. Her grandma had told her 3 years back, right before vanishing, that a truly strong warrior needs real conviction to channel their strength. Invading soldiers had once ransacked Reina's home, so she knew better than anyone else just how precious life is. These combatants had families, fathers, sons, and husbands. She knew it sounded pretty naive, but she clung to that belief regardless. She glanced up at me in the bleachers. I gave her a wave, and with that, all her exhaustion seemed to just melt away. She actually did it, reclaiming the glory that belonged to me. From the start, I hung that pristine Eagle Gladiator medal on a massive display stand right in my study, so anyone stepping inside would spot it instantly. Unlike the one grandfather Edward had won, this badge belonged to Reina and me, proof that I'd restored the Luca family honor. Alila led Reina inside by the hand. The scales that once lined her face and back from the battle were pretty much gone by now, leaving only a few remaining on her belly and hands. Honestly, she had even fewer scales than when we first crossed paths. Her dragon horns had shrunken down to their usual size. Dainty, adorable, and completely snow-white. I motioned her over, saying, "Hey, White Enchantress, you're officially the MVP of the Lyoka domain." She blushed at the title. The locals of Norans had dubbed her that because of the massive impression she made during the tournament. The dragon warrior she'd crushed. Galen used to go by the Gladiator Destroyer, but Reyna's moniker wasn't just about bagging wins. It was about how totally mesmerizing she was. "Master, did I let you down?" she asked, her crimson eyes glowing with an emotion I couldn't quite pinpoint. "No way, Reyna. Even if you hadn't taken home that badge, I could never be disappointed in you." Her thick dragon tail began to wag with sheer joy, reminiscent of the way Saruka's feline tail always spilled her true feelings. Meanwhile, inside the chilly royal palace, King Ziluk 13 sat perched upon his throne, as Galen groveled before him, pressing his face to the floor. The king couldn't wrap his head around how a shattered iron blade, lacking any enchantment, had managed to pierce Galen's dragon scales by relying purely on raw power. When questioned, Galen confessed that Reyna's dragon heritage ran far deeper than his own, making her a likely direct offspring of a pure-blood dragon. The king's eyes narrowed. A young dragon lady boasting such potent blood could double as a harem concubine and a lethal warrior. He toyed with the idea of claiming her. Yet Reyna was notoriously loyal to the Lyoka clan. Snatching her openly would trigger a massive scandal, so he'd have to deploy wealth and status to force her compliance. Ziluk was convinced that money could fix anything, and if cash failed, brute force would do. A full month flew by after the tournament. Yet my promotion to Earl was still nowhere in sight. By all accounts, winning the Gladiator Championship ought to have settled it, but the palace maintained total radio silence, acting as though my triumph meant absolutely nothing. I didn't let it get to me too much, though. Even without the official title, I was doing just fine. The cream trade had funded the growth of my guard force, up to a solid 5,000 troops, which included 1,000 fully armored heavy cavalry. That ranked me among the most powerful lords in Norans, despite technically still being a mere viscount. On top of the 20,000 gold already invested in the military, I cleared 300,000 Norans gold coins as my cut of the cream profits from the Far East Trading Company. Local demand among the nobility was tapering off, but Vis sent word that he was gearing up to launch the product in Yad and Rima. If that panned out, my revenue would instantly skyrocket several times over. Sure, 300,000 sounded like a massive fortune, but I knew it wouldn't cut it. Actual warfare meant clashing with powerful mages, so I had to secure anti-magic materials for Big Lawn to craft in his specialized warding gear. Right while I was swamped with all this, my butler arrived, bearing an official missive from King Ziluk the 13th. The butler passed the message along to Reyna. Since I was tied up managing regional affairs, the newly acquired Luke territory was grander and far wealthier than the previous one, but that just brought tons of extra paperwork. Reyna had formed a habit of chilling by my side whenever she finished her training drills, and Alilu was incredibly giving, gracious enough to make some time for me. "Go ahead and read it," I muttered, without even glancing up, assuming it was probably just my promotion to Earl. Finally getting approved, Reyna broke the official royal seal and began to read, but suddenly she just froze. I looked over and noticed her hands were shaking, her eyes flooded with panic and heartbreak. Like a cornered deer, I snatched the document from her. Following some hollow flattery and compliments aimed at Reyna, the king cut straight to the chase. He was basically asking how much gold, or what kind of rank I wanted, in exchange for turning Reyna over to the crown. It clicked right then why she looked so devastated. She was terrified I'd actually sell her out. "Master, Reyna will train harder and get stronger, so please let me stay right by your side." Her tail slumped. She knew exactly what kind of trouble this letter brought. The most powerful man in Norans wanted her for himself. Even if I said no, my days as a noble were pretty much over. The king wouldn't even have to get his hands dirty. A single hint from him, and every aristocrat who used to be friendly would instantly start blacklisting me. My good name, my peerage, the whole thing could vanish in a heartbeat. And if I actually gave her up, there was no real guarantee Ziluk would hold up his end. He could easily take Reyna and leave me high and dry. It was a total trap with zero good options. Fighting back meant pure suicide. My 5,000 personal guards up against a royal army of over 200,000, plus more than 1 million troops, if you counted all the noble houses combined. Reina, do you actually want to go to the capital? I questioned, fully aware that her devotion to me was already absolute. She shook her head so rapidly, it resembled a spinning rattle drum. Don't sweat it. I won't hand you over to anyone. As long as you want to remain in Lucca, this place will always be your home. I gently took hold of her warm little hand. Her trust in me was absolute and completely blind. After all, I was the one who provided everything for her. Back when she had nothing, she swore to herself that, if she were ever forced to leave me and serve another master, she'd rather end her own life. I didn't write back. Instead, I grabbed Reina and set off for the capital that very night. My sole hope rested on Arya, who possessed the influence and power that even King Zillick wouldn't dare to challenge callously. My only real concern was whether she'd actually throw me a bone. Maybe for Saruka's sake, or maybe not. The Magic Academy was massive, situated right in a bustling quarter of the city. Following a quick word with the guards posted at the gate, they instructed me to wait. Reina wore a baggy cloak to keep her identity under wraps. The White Enchantress had become far too famous by now. Before long, a guard reappeared and guided us to a pavilion on the campus grounds. It wasn't long before Saruka came sprinting toward me, her cute little cat tail swishing back and forth. She hadn't gotten a chance to talk to me at the tournament, and she was clearly making up for lost time now, nuzzling against me until she had her fill. Master, my instructor, will be arriving shortly. He bolted over the moment I heard the news. She had actually ditched class just to come see me. I stroked her head. Have you been keeping well? She nodded, then eyed the cloaked figure standing behind me. I motioned for Reina to lower her hood. The two girls immediately sized each other up. Reina felt a sudden wave of self-doubt. Saruka was gorgeous, and being a cat girl, her kind was vastly more popular among humans. Beside dragonkin, and Saruka addressed me as master, too. Reina easily figured out what they were to each other, which bit a bit, though Saruka was purely hyped. I know who you are, the White Enchantress, who brought home the win for our master. You're seriously awesome. I wish I could stand by him out in the open like you. Her respect felt totally genuine. She'd blossomed since moving to the capital. Way less shy, much more upbeat. Then again, maybe she only acted that way with me. The two hit it off pretty quickly. But once Saruka learned what the king demanded, she got absolutely furious on my behalf. Just then, Arya's voice chimed in from behind. So that's the reason you dropped by. Arya caught me totally off guard by materializing out of thin air. This legendary Grand Magus, who barely ever showed her face around town, was sizing me up with a calculating look. She was the one who backed Reina up at the tourney, when folks claimed she was cheating with magic. Good day, Duchess Arya. I greeted. She just brushed it off. Drop the Duchess bit, call me Dean. Saruka happens to be my prize pupil, so there's no need for us to stand on ceremony. She leaned over and poked Saruka's cat ears, prompting her to leap back. Saruka's ears and tail were incredibly sensitive. I was the only person she'd let touch them without flinching. Arya took a seat, her snowy hair catching the gentle breeze. It wasn't white from growing old, though. White elves are born with that hair color, and the purer the lineage, the brighter the shade. Even after centuries had passed, her stunning looks hadn't withered a bit. If she weren't so insanely strong, tons of aristocrats would have tried to claim her. Din Arya, is there any way to get the king to change his mind? I asked. She just shook her head and glanced at Reina instead. She really is quite a beauty. That's incredibly pure, white dragon blood. No wonder that kid looks so interested. Then, she threw up her hands. Look, I'm just an honorary duchess. I can't just overrule the king's decree. You either surrender the little dragon girl, or kiss your noble status goodbye. You're a smart guy. Do I seriously need to help you weigh the options? My heart sank, even though I'd seen this coming. I couldn't just abandon Reina, putting her raw talent aside. If I cave and hand her over today, what happens when the king catches wind of Saruka and demands her to? Why just give up Saruka as well? Would anyone ever trust me enough to follow me again? I'll fight this to the bitter end, I declared, even if it means defying the king. He can't just rob people of their freedom like this. I bought Reina from a slave trader, sure, but I took off her slave collar ages ago. She isn't property, she's family. Whether they're humans or demi-humans, everyone deserves the right to live freely. I will stand by Reina, even against the crown. Arya smiled, a smile so breathtakingly gorgeous. It made the garden flowers look completely dull. So you throw away your entire future and gamble the lives of everyone in your domain, all for the sake of a single person. This is a world where the strong prey on the weak. I replied calmly, I'll lead my people to battle. It's not a guaranteed loss for us. She shook her head, no matter my choice. It was a losing move. Then, she beckoned Reina over. Come here, little white dragon. Reina gave me a cautious look. I gave a nod, and she stepped closer. As Arya rested her pale hand on Reina's head, a bizarre light flashed, and Reina's dragon horns dwindled and vanished, leaving nothing but a smooth forehead. Her scales completely faded away, and even her face shifted. She looked just like a normal human girl. I pulled up her status. A brand new line had popped up beneath her talents. Bloodline hidden. There you go, Arya said. Keep her hidden from the nobility from now on. This enchantment will hold for at least a decade. When it starts fading, bring her back to me. Go tell Xylek that the dragon girl escaped, and ask him to send a search party to help. Scour your lands. You know how to play these aristocratic games. I shouldn't have to spell it out for you. She picked up her tea and took a sip. By the way, your cream is pretty great. Imafan. I could barely hold back my sigh of relief. I offered a deep bow. Thank you, Lady Arya. I won't ever forget this favor. I didn't do it for your sake, she replied casually. I just couldn't stand seeing my cute apprentice weeping. Saruka pouted. Master, I don't cry, seriously. Oh, I remember when you first arrived at the academy. You used to bury yourself under the covers, sobbing every night because you were homesick. Saruka's face flushed crimson. How did you find out about that? Who knows? Maybe the god of light whispered it to me. I said my goodbyes to a reluctant Saruka. She hadn't reached the rank of magic master yet, so she had to remain behind to study under Arya. During the carriage ride back, Reina held onto my sleeve the entire time. Once we stepped inside, she finally spoke. Forgive me, master. Reina caused you a total mess. She was just incredibly anxious. Even though she knew I'd never give her up, she just couldn't shake that fear. How is this on you? I asked softly. I'm the one who pushed you into the tournament. If anyone's to blame here, it's definitely me. You did an amazing job, Reina. She shook her head. Master doesn't make mistakes. If Reina were only powerful enough, nobody would ever dare to threaten you. I didn't say another word. Instead, I just stared out the carriage window, at the scenery rolling by. She had a point. I seriously needed to get stronger. In this world, the powerful simply devour the weak. There was no reasoning with a reality like that. What? Linwei claims the white enchantress bailed. That had to be exactly how Zeluk reacted. The moment my envoy delivered the update, naturally, his very first thought wasn't that Reina had actually flown the coop. He figured I was just flat out refusing to surrender her. But when my messenger threw in that I was requesting the king's assistance to hunt her down, even promising to hand her over if she's caught, that totally threw him off. Was I being legit? Or just hyper-confident she'd never be tracked down? Zeluk dispatched Gaedlin as his emissary, backed by 1,000 royal guards, to launch a massive, thorough sweep of Luca territory. Since Gaedlin was a dragon-blooded fighter, he could readily pick up on other dragon heritages. The king calculated that, with Gaedlin's intuition and 1,000 troops, absolutely nothing could hide across my domain. Too bad for him. I'd already covered that. Reina passed perfectly as a human now. Thanks to Arya's spellcasting, her true blood was masked. She looked totally different, and she'd even gone and changed her name to Ishishi. Gaelin could have strolled right past her without sensing a thing. The nobility had their own rumors, gossiping about why the king deployed troops straight into my lands. Some claimed I'd pissed off his majesty and was under watch. Others figured I was the king's favorite, and that he was loaning me forces to protect my borders. As long as neither Zeluk nor I opened our mouths, the real story would remain under wraps. Neither of us had any reason to spill. Honestly, this whole mess was just embarrassing for both sides. Right before the royal guard rolled in, I relocated 3,000 of my troops over to the old Luica region, partly because the old border defenses were completely wide open. Norrell and a mere 500 guards couldn't possibly hold the line alone, but mainly because I didn't want the king getting wind of how powerful my military had actually become. I stationed 1,000 heavy cavalry and 2,000 infantry out there, leaving myself 2,000 men as a home defense force. Once this drama blew over, and Zeluk finally quit obsessing over Reina, I planned to enlist more soldiers. Only by building up real power could I ensure a disaster like this never happened, ever again. Meanwhile, Michel, the third prince, had been doing some quiet digging on his own. He'd been tracking Saruka's carriage routes, proving it had crossed into Luica territory before heading back toward the capital. Pairing that with the bizarre vanishing of my dragon girl, he was clearly putting the pieces together. He took me for a lightweight, just some newly minted viscount who'd stumbled into luck by capturing a couple of Rama royals. He had no idea I'd raised my army using a mere 1,000 gold pieces from hawking that eagle emblem. He assumed my granddad Edward, the ex-sword saint, had willed me a massive fortune. But Michel wasn't making a move quite yet. he still couldn't gauge where things stood between Saruka and me. Plus, his old man was already keeping tabs on my lands. Most of all, Michelle had just secured the rights to take over Blackstone Fortress, and he was cooking up something big, throwing open the gates for the beast men to overrun Norrens. The beast folk hadn't raided for ages, but whenever they did, they'd blitz through the frontier before getting bottlenecked at Blackstone Fortress. Next year, though, would be a different story. Michelle intended to drop the drawbridge and roll out the red carpet. Norrens was on the brink of total chaos. The moment the king's emissaries reached my domain, I went out to greet them myself, backed up by Reyna and Eliyahu. Their chief envoy was a low-born viscount named Connor. Alongside Gideon, Connor gave a courteous introduction, and I gave him a warm, smiling reception. I'll have our best cream bread served up for you. And once we track down that renegade Reyna, do put in a good word for me with his majesty. As those words left my mouth, I passed a hefty sack of gold coins right into his palm. That unmistakable clink and the heavy weight made his eyes snap wide open. Well, I'll happily partake in your wonderful hospitality. He pocketed the cash without missing a beat. The king ordered him to hunt down the white enchantress. But how hard he actually looked for her was entirely his call. As long as Galen didn't catch wind of anything, this little gig could be wrapped up in no time. He'd only just arrived and was already making bank. All of a sudden, I looked pretty good to him. Turns out making moves in this world takes more than just throwing punches. You gotta know how to play the system. Connor spent the entire week chilling and doing squat. Once I handed over those 2,000 Naran gold coins, which was serious bank for a landless viscount, with 0 territory and no tax revenue. He just ate, slept, and occasionally popped up around Galen, solely to look like he was busy. The royal guards pulled nonstop searches, yet they were never going to track down Reyna. She was hiding in plain sight this whole time, disguised as a human girl named Aishishi, sticking by my side day in and day out. We even paused her training until the drama blew over. Not that she minded at all. She claimed just being near me set her heart racing, as if it were somehow making her stronger. Gatelin was losing steam too. When he first rolled up, the white dragon's scent was distinct, but it grew weaker by the day. Following a heavy downpour, the trace dissolved entirely. He began to assume Reyna had abandoned Luke's domain altogether, or that I'd smuggled her out. Either way, he was coming up empty-handed. It was driving him crazy. He had actually planned on asking the king to hand Reyna over to him as a prize once she was captured, intending to breed with her for powerful bloodlines. Except now, that dream was totally dead. When departure time arrived, Connor grinned at me like we were best buddies. Viscount Linway, my bad for the hassle these past weeks. The guy had been living the high life the entire stay, gorging on fine dining and pampered by maids. Luxury this low-tier noble had never tasted before. I passed him another pouch of gold coins as a parting gift, causing his eyes to squint with joy. Rest easy, Viscount, he assured me. I'll assure his majesty of your loyalty, dedication, and absolute distance from the white enchantress. I bet she crossed the Rima River ages ago to hide out in the NAS tribal lands. Letting out a sigh, I offered my thanks. The bribe was slipped over so smoothly that Gideon, who was standing right behind us, didn't spot a thing. Connor's hands moved at an unbelievable speed whenever gold was on the line. Meanwhile, the royal guards had been whining the entire time. I intentionally served them nothing but stale black bread, while my own troops feasted on wheat cakes, alongside salted potato soup, even enjoying meat right before their very eyes, since those elite guards only received bran cakes. Back at the capital, my standard soldiers were eating far better than the king's own men. They couldn't help but stare at my men's iron armor and top-tier weaponry, either. Had they caught a glimpse of the heavy cavalry I relocated to Old Luica, they would have been utterly floored. Master, why did you give that aristocrat so much wealth? Reyna questioned me afterward. Patting her on the head, I replied, the big threats are easy to manage. It's the petty ones that stir up real trouble. 2,000 coins mean nothing to us these days. But buying Connor's praise keeps unwanted eyes off the Luca domain, allowing us to grow in tranquility. She pondered my words in silence, before softly adding, Master, thank you for everything you've done for me. I shook my head. Ought to be thanking all of you. Without your help, there would be no Luca territory and no me. Later that morning, Bidey came to visit. She quietly took a seat right next to me, just tracking my moves the whole morning. Completely silent. I'd already clocked that her metrics were back to baseline. Combat at 223, strategy at 482, and favorability at 35, loaded with perks like Dragon Tamer, Dragon Slayer, hero, empress, and world hopper. An absolute SS plus rating. Those stats were straight up insane. As soon as I wrapped up my final chore, I faced her and asked, heading out. She wasn't shocked that I caught on. She gave a nod and fished out a white necklace charm from her gear. A miniature, vividly carved dragon pulsing with a bizarre warmth. A little goodbye token, she mentioned, to say thanks for looking after me. I took it and put it right on. Seeing it on me brought a smile to her face. Catch you later, I bet. Then she got up, headed for the exit, and tossed a quick wave my way. I kept quiet, simply watching her figure fade into the distance. Once Connor and his crew hit the road, I got right back to signing up troops. In just under 2 months, that cream hustle pulled in over $1 million gold no-ran coins via the Far East Trading Company. That's serious cash, enough to turn a duke's head. I poured into bumping my security detail to 10,000, which threw 1,000 heavy cavalry into the mix. Count in the 3,000 guys I deployed to Old Lucca, and my army was looking pretty formidable. No crazy star potential among the fresh hires, sadly. But hey, at least Action and Anchor were around to run things. Summer arrived with a vengeance. The heat was killer, making the horizon literally shimmer. I could barely even concentrate on my files, and without a reliable manager around, the whole workload fell on my shoulders. Thankfully, Biddy's necklace kept my head clear. Otherwise, I'd have totally cracked under the pressure. Have some iced tea, young master. Alilu offered one afternoon, placing a glass before me. I blinked at it. Real ice, right in the peak of summer? Turns out Raina had merely brushed against the well, and the water froze instantly. Nobody could explain it, but the air around her was getting colder by the minute. I went out to find her, only to discover the property's small lake was frozen solid despite the blazing July heat. Her power level had skyrocketed to 168. Her frost dragon legacy was finally kicking into overdrive. When she looked up at me from the ice, her pupils had narrowed into sharp, reptilian slits, and her crimson eyes looked more intense than ever. Yet, within seconds, she shifted back to her usual human disguise. Aria's concealment spell was still holding up. She rushed toward me, beaming with excitement. I gave her head a pat, surprised to find it warm, rather than freezing like I'd anticipated. Just dropped by to check on you, I murmured, which made her blush furiously. It's a shame the illusion affected her tail, though. I couldn't catch it wagging. Meanwhile, the whole kingdom of No-Ran was in utter chaos. The territories surrendered by Rima as war. Reparations were currently being partitioned. King Zillik claimed the crown jewel of the region, a massive, prosperous Rima town, for his own domain, while the High Dukes divided the choice land around it, with Duke Simon securing the best plot after the crown. Right after that, hordes of laborers, artisans, and citizens were uprooted and deployed to build new settlements. An army of 15,000 royal guardsmen accompanied them to guarantee the pioneers' safety, to wipe out thugs and monsters. Zillik originally meant to deploy fewer troops, but with Michelle securing Blackstone Fortress and its 50,000-strong garrison, the king figured he could spare a lot more. He sent 150,000, leaving just 50,000 defenders, and some 1,000 griffin riders. Back in the capital, every noble, from dukes to barons, drained their own lands of soldiers to join the massive land grab. Every noble except me. Zillik cut me out of the feast on purpose. He still didn't buy that Raina had actually escaped, and Connor's glowing praise about me only made the king even more paranoid. So I walked away empty-handed, without a single plot of land. Honestly, I didn't give a damn. Sure, that territory was tempting, but I lacked the energy and funds to manage a third estate anyway. Developing wild frontiers is pricier than people think, and the payoff takes forever. It was better to double down on what I had and build up both of my Lucca domains. Feder, meanwhile, was full of regret. He realized he'd let a perfect son-in-law slip through his fingers when he turned me down. But once the royal guards packed up and left my estate, I seemed to lose all my favor overnight. The gossip about me completely stopped, and I got absolutely zilch from the new territory split. Not even a tiny crumb. Everyone knew those lands were won, solely because I captured 2 Rama royals. Yet even Feder secured a piece of woodland while I got 0. He assumed I must have pissed off the king somehow, so he ordered his daughter, Lena, to forget all about me and start cozying up to Viscount 1. Instead, a slimy 40-something guy notorious for a trashy personal life. Lena's eyes went completely numb. Her father had never seen her as anything but a pawn. Definitely not as his daughter, anyway. See, we've been close friends since childhood, sharing some pretty genuine feelings. Getting shoved toward that dude felt just like being thrown into a pit. Something in her gaze shifted right then. as if she'd finally seen her dad's true colors. If this household never treated her like kin, why on earth should she stick around? Meanwhile, I was pouring major funds into building up a magic core. I blew tens of thousands of gold pieces, snapping up every basic magic textbook out there, along with advanced theory volumes. Everyone's got a unique magical affinity. Some are great with fire, but totally hopeless with water, while others can control multiple elements, yet suffer from low mana reserves. Tracking down another prodigy, like Saruka, was a long shot, so I needed to screen pretty much everyone. Naraincel just watched, as my guards hauled pile after pile of magic texts into his quarters, right alongside 100 practice staves and 10 beginner-level magic staves. I assigned 20 gifted citizens to apprentice under him. His stats had actually bumped up since teaming up with me. Strategy hit 109, and his loyalty climbed from 80 to 90. Honestly, I still didn't quite grasp what made him so fiercely devoted to me, but that high rating meant I could hand him some critical tasks, giving his shoulder a pat. I promised to hunt down some high-tier spellbooks to help speed up his journey to becoming a grand magus. His elven ears gave a little twitch of excitement, achieving that had always been his ultimate goal. To be fair, I'd learned how to talk big from my old corporate bosses back on Earth, but seeing how dead serious Naraincel was, I figured I'd better actually follow through this time. I also began sketching out a project most aristocrats dismissed as a joke. Archery. In this realm, specialized elite squads held supreme power, followed closely by devastating heavy cavalry charges, and then heavily armored foot soldiers. Bowmen were pretty much only good for picking off light infantry. Against heavy plate, arrows were basically useless. On top of that, training them cost a fortune. You had to find guys with insane upper body strength, not to mention sourcing high-grade iron for the tips, or even upgrading to enchanted ones. That refined iron was pure luxury, way higher quality than what you'd use for standard chainmail. Because of that, pretty much nobody outside the Royal Guard even bothered putting archers on their ramparts. Most lords just stuck with ballista turrets and boiling oil. But I had a different take. I was already constructing a magic core, so why not give bowmen a shot too? Honestly, any edge that could beef up my military was worth a gamble. If there was one resource I had in spades compared to other houses, it was cash. So I peeled off 1,000 recruits from my 10,000-strong army to establish a dedicated archery division. Luckily, the bulk of them had worked as hunters before enlisting, meaning they already possessed basic marksmanship. Up in Norans, a hunter with lousy aim simply stars when winter hits. As a result, they barely needed practice to nail their targets. I also sent a letter to Norrell, urging him to hire some extra blacksmiths to back up Big Lawn. A single craftsman just couldn't keep pace with our massive gear demands. The top-tier metal workers usually belong to the dwarven race. Those short, burly folks totally obsessed with the forge and heavy drinking. Sadly, none of them had drifted into town lately. What I desperately needed right now was a solid steward. Running 2 entire fiefdoms completely on my own was breaking me. I figured I'd pay another visit to the human trafficker. Folks who'd been stripped of their freedom were always the most desperate to win it back, which actually made them way easier to control, especially when filling highly sensitive roles. That plump merchant caught sight of me from across the street and came hustling over. "Lord Linway, what brings you around? Please step inside." He deliberately used Lord instead of Viscount, just to cozy up to me. I asked if he had any fresh arrivals. "No exotic Viskin, but I just managed to bag some white elves. Took a hell of a lot of work to get him. Want to sneak a peek?" He gave me a shifty smirk. Guaranteed untouched. He guided me toward a card, where 5 tiny elf girls were bunched up closely, looking like terrified little deer. Their hair resembled Arya's snow-white locks, but carried a dull, grayish undertone, meaning their lineage wasn't quite as flawless. I quickly scanned their attributes. Chalice, Combat 4, Strategy 88, blessed with gifts like a photographic memory, incredible logical reasoning, and full fluency in ancient tongues. Nashya, Kumbaset, Strategy 79, with a specific knack for alchemical mastery. The remaining 3 scored around 40 in strategy, good enough to groom into decent housemaids. 2 of them possessed seriously mind-blowing mental stats. This was a massive jackpot. Name your price. 10,000 gold coins a pop. But take the whole bunch of 5, and I'll let him go for 40,000. Deal. I'll have someone drop off the payment. Once I got back to the estate, Yahello and Reyna were waiting. They gaped at the 5 little elves, then shot a look right back at me. "Master, are these?" Yahello stammered. "Are Yahello and Reyna just not cut it for you anymore?" Reyna kept completely quiet, but the room's temperature Around her felt like it chilled down a bit. Boss, are you seriously targeting these poor kids now? Alilu questioned with a totally over-the-top pout, basically wondering out loud why her C-plus assets lost out to these underdeveloped little girls. I was honestly left totally speechless. Alilu, what kind of creep do you take me for? Come on, I'm only 17. I just couldn't stand watching them suffer out there. I wanted to give them a safe haven. Is that a crime? Reina and Alilu both stopped, molded over, and slowly nodded. Fair point, they agreed. Seeing how easily I managed to convince them, I wondered if their strategy stats were just a joke. Maybe my own stat is actually way higher than 73. Master really is a saint, Alila chimed in. Your heart is as kind as the god of light himself. Brushing off the flattery, I handed down my orders. These 5 are training under you now, plus the head maid, to learn proper maid etiquette. Feed them the exact same meals as the others. Understood, young master, Alilu replied cheerfully. Once I walked away, the 5 little elves finally let their guard down. In their past, only men had eyed them with creepy greed. These 2 pretty older sisters seemed harmless enough. Poor little Chalice, though, was getting her ears massaged by Alilu, who clearly got a kick out of teasing the elf girls. Chalice's face flushed bright red, and her pointed ears grew burning hot, before Alilu ultimately let go, leaving the tiny elf slumped on the floor, looking completely wiped out. The 5 elves had been fitted for custom uniforms. By now, Chalice had assumed the older girls would be sweet. Turns out she was totally wrong about that. Reina, however, wasn't part of the banter. She was busy counting on her fingers, with a pretty conflicted look on her face. When Alilu asked what she was trying to figure out, Reina replied, I'm tallying up how many days a week needs. If every girl gets a single day, the master's harem just keeps on growing. So I've got to lock down at least 1 day for myself. Lulu was left a bit speechless by that. I chose to let the 5 elves get settled in first, before putting their specific talents to actual use. My main focus was tracking down a political administrator. Without one, the endless paperwork was totally consuming me. Shala's flawless photographic memory, sharp logic, and mastery of ancient languages made her the ultimate fit for the role. Meanwhile, Nashia's gift for alchemy was even more thrilling. Throughout this continent, a master alchemist could command status that easily rivaled a master of magic. Some were capable of forging terrifying alchemical beasts, with raw destructive power surpassing even a grand mage, while others cooked up elixirs that granted normal folks the immense strength of a giant bear, albeit with some pretty nasty side effects. The catch was, alchemy was seriously underdeveloped in No-Rans and Rima. Only the Yad Kingdom possessed genuine expertise, and they absolutely loathed outsiders, especially No-Rans nobility. We pillaged their borders year after year, so they basically detested us. Until I could get my hands on some alchemy manuals, that whole project had to sit on the back burner. Our cream enterprise was seriously thriving, but really hurt knowing that half of my earnings went straight to the Far East Trading Company. Down the line, I needed to launch my own merchant network, but I just lacked a reliable person to manage it right now. With the summer already half over, I had to start hoarding grain for the winter chill. Last year's surplus, heavy hunting, had left the woods pretty barren of wildlife. So I grabbed a few hundred guards and headed over to the Far East Trading Company. The paths felt eerie and deserted, since the bulk of the young men were sent off to join a massive land rush, leaving these regions barely protected. All this quiet just didn't sit right with me. Vis looked completely thrown off by my arrival. Well, Viscount Linway, shouldn't you be preoccupied with settling your new territory? He had no clue the king stripped my title and made me a commoner. As a nobleman consumed by running a trading business, he had no real way of catching wind of that gossip. Besides, everyone in the know was keeping their mouths shut. I've actually got plenty of free time lately, I remarked casually. Got enough wheat available for purchase. He did. 100 cartloads priced at 1,000 gold pieces each. A portion of it belonged to last year's harvest, but at least he was straightforward about it. Every single wagon carried roughly 10 tons, added to the supplies I already kept in reserve. This batch would easily see us through the winter months. I instructed him to take payment out of next month's cream earnings. Oh, one last thing. Do you happen to have any leads on alchemy materials? He gave a shake of his head. He'd run into them previously, but chose to pass on them, given that they weren't popular sellers around Norrens, though he promised to keep his eyes peeled for any future lots. Gazing out across the silent streets of the realm, with its defenses completely depleted because of the land grab, a rotten feeling began to brew deep in my gut. Something was seriously off. Meanwhile, far from here, Bidey had made it back to her own empire, where she sorted out the turncoats without hesitation. Rows of severed rebel succubus heads now decorated the chilly stone steps of her throne room. Now that her affliction was completely broken, and backed by both her frost dragon and her dedicated protectors, she utterly squashed the uprising without breaking a sweat. Honestly, those idiots only made any headway in the first place because a Grand Mage's curse had caught her off guard, right while her frost dragon was deep in hibernation. But now, she reclaimed her seat upon the frozen throne, the completely untouchable succubus empress once again. Yet, weirdly enough, she felt a sudden wave of nostalgia for the peaceful days she had spent back in Luke. By the time autumn arrived in the territory, I stood there surveying my troops with genuine pride. We had 10,000 soldiers in total, 8,000 fully armored guards, 1,000 archers, and another 1,000 heavy cavalry. The archers were equipped with unique, highly refined iron arrowheads crafted by Bigland's crew, deadly enough to pierce straight through solid iron shields, as long as there was enough power behind a shot. 50 heavy crossbows were deployed across the city walls, alongside a massive stockpile of rolling logs, heavy stones, and various other siege defense supplies. I had even set up small watchtower outposts all along the banks of the Rima River, which were manned in shifts 24/7. If so much as a shadow stirred on the opposite bank, the signal fires would instantly flare up, and scouts would hustle back to report the news right away. Word from the merchants was that the NAS beast tribes across the water had been locked in a feud over the Beast Kings, throned for decades, leaving the No-Rans alone for years. Still, I wasn't about to buy into that intel blindly. Since I hadn't witnessed their internal conflict firsthand, I refused to pull a stunt like the old Count St. Martin, who just prayed that the beast folk would take pity on us. Those brutal races don't have a merciful bone in their bodies. If they ever manage to break through, absolutely everything, women, men, and property alike will just become their plunder. My own lands sit right on the edge of the Rima River, positioned on one of the primary routes leading to the capital. So, if the beast folk ever decide to cross, they are bound to strike here first, simply because our roads are the broadest around. Just as I was weighing whether to install extra ballistas ahead of winter, Akshin trotted over. He and Anchor had been grinding away, drilling the troops despite Norl's absence. His skin had tanned from the sun, and he'd shot up a bit too, likely thanks to the better rations. "Sir, I haven't caught sight of Biddy lately. What you been up to?" His eyes darted nervously at the mention of her name. I caught on instantly. The kid had a massive crush. Resting a hand on his shoulder, I gestured toward the roaring Rima River, just past the ramparts. "Akshin, do you see those waters? Across that bank lie endless chances for glory. One day, those beast folk might cross over, endangering our homelands and loved ones. You must grow stronger, fierce enough to defend everyone, secure enough honor and gold, and you can win the heart of the woman you love." His expression flared with fierce resolve. "Sir, I completely understand." Giving a deep bow, he turned on his heel, dropping his questions about Biddy's whereabouts. He realized that self-improvement had to come first. Attaining knighthood, or perhaps even a minor peerage, would finally give him the guts to confess. Watching him leave, I let out a soft sigh. Even if Akshin managed to rank up to a knight or lord, Biddy was a succubus empress, touting a 223 combat rating and a 482 strategy stat. She would never view him in that light. Yet, the truth was far too brutal for such a sincere, earnest young man. Sometimes, a beautiful illusion is exactly what keeps us moving. Winter arrived ahead of schedule that year. Though it was only late autumn, sleet was already falling, with a biting chill piercing through everything. Wrapping my outerwear tightly, I observed the household staff and maids, still plugging away despite the harsh weather, tending to the castle and manicuring the grounds. Letting out a sigh, my breath formed frosty little plumes. I toyed with the idea of drilling with the knights, just to toughen myself up. But my inner couch potato always got the upper hand. I was a total shut-in before getting ice-skied, and my old man, Ryan, was never one for brawling either. So Grandfather Edward's fighting prowess completely skipped me. I just rationalized that. As long as my troops were formidable enough, they would keep everything safe. And honestly, under my management, conditions across the fiefdom had vastly improved. I actually slashed taxes in half, compared to the era of the former Count St. Martin, and generated loads of employment, tending the mounts, cooking meals for the garrison, and servicing weaponry. A handful of silver pieces might sound like chump change, but a massive round of rye bread only set you back a copper. My men pulled in 3 silver coins a month in wages, which was plenty to splurge on some rabbit meat. and grab drinks down at the pub. Honestly, I could have wiped out taxes altogether since 100 gold coins was basically pocket change to me. Yet, I didn't want the public getting complacent with the sweet life. I kept them well off, but on a tight leash, consistently holding that boundary. Dispense ample goodwill. Cultivate an image of courage and benevolence. And when the moment arrives to make the tough calls, the populace will back you up. That is precisely what I required, my lord. Today's administrative tasks are fully completed. Young Shalai lingered right behind me, her gentle tone sounding timid and endearing. I gently stroked her hair, watching her pointy ears twitch just a bit. She was clearly loving it. She'd been managing my paperwork for a month by now, and honestly, she was brilliant at it. Super fast and efficient, frequently coming up with fixes better than my own. The girl was just a natural. If her stats page had labeled her royalty, I totally would have believed she was some exiled elf princess. Her loyalty score had shot up to 90. It hit 80 pretty fast after she settled in here, and putting her in charge of administration boosted it even further. The 5 elf girls never anticipated that I'd treat them this well. Good food, proper care, and actual human decency. They figured being slaves meant endless misery. I still hadn't taken off their slave collars yet. Not out of some twisted motive, but simply because the moment wasn't right. I could hear the troops training on the manor grounds, while kids played out in the newly built square, taking in this tranquil view. I just hoped it would last. Meanwhile, over at the Magic Academy, Saruka pulled off something pretty wild. Channeling raw mana into her staff, she unleashed a massive fireball, about 1/10 the size of Arya's entire courtyard. It crashed into a giant rock, completely vaporizing it. Arya casually waved her wand to suppress the explosion, then took a sip of tea. Nicely done, Saruka. That brief bit of praise made Saruka light up, and she happily clung to Arya's arm. Master, I finally made it to Magic Master rank. Arya smiled. I honestly never guessed that romance could be such a huge motivator. Saruka playfully fired back. Come on, Master. You had plenty of guys chasing you back then, too. How come you never fell for anyone? Arya gave her a harder rap on the head than usual. During her younger days, she had found sorcery way more fascinating than guys. Once she became powerful enough, every man seemed dull, so she had stayed single ever since. Still, that didn't mean some little cat girl got to tease her about it. Winter is coming, Arya noted. Do you want to stay at the academy? Or head back to your little Viscount? Saruka wrapped her arms around Arya's shoulders. I'd like to stay with you a bit longer, Master. Now that she had attained the rank of Magic Master, she could come back to me at any time. She wanted to spend this winter hitting the books more. Since she had already made it to Magic Master, why not shoot for Grand Mage? Well, at least you have some gratitude. Arya remarked. That winter, I hosted a massive bonfire party for my troops. There was roasted turkey, wild boar, beef, and lamb, along with soft white bread and tons of cream. Stepping up onto a wooden crate, I looked out at the whole crowd gathered together. I bet you're all wondering why I made all this food. Well, today marks the festival of the Goddess of Light. Following a brief speech, I toasted endurance. To Luca, they hoisted their bowls of fresh fruit and wine, then dug right in. This was a banquet most of them could never afford. Not even at a tavern, and I was serving it on the house. The guards out on patrol duty, meanwhile, received 3 extra silver coins apiece. The entire setup was just a spur-of-the-moment idea. Isla brought up the holiday that morning, and I figured, why not? I had plenty of grain in reserve. It served as a pretty good way to boost loyalty, too, and it totally worked. Even the lowest loyalty ratings among my soldiers sat around 50, while the highest hit a solid 100, and this bash boosted everyone's stats big time. When the moment arrived to stand and fight for Luca, these guys weren't going to break easily. The party kept rocking all through the night. Troops were dancing around the bonfire, and a few brave souls even started belting out tunes. Auction. An anchor went head-to-head to see who could chug more fruit. Wine. I slipped away quietly while they were still living it up. Getting some rest is just as crucial as training. My old man would probably have called this a total waste of cash, but I have my own way of running the show. Next, I want to check up on Narencel and the magic recruits. He gave a respectful bow and reported that all 20 apprentices had mastered basic magic. 10 focused on fire, 5 on earth, 3 on water, and 2 were skilled in handling both fire and water. The apprentices bowed deeply to me. They knew I'd handed them the shot to become someone respected. Their strategy scores all hovered around 60, and each possessed a knack for sensing magical energy, which was the baseline requirement for becoming a mage. I had scoured the entire domain and only dug up these 20. Then I dropped by the forge. I had moved Biglin over from the old Lukka territory to cut down on transit, time, and potential hazards. Norl and 3,000 troops could hold down the fort, just fine on their own. Biglon was totally in the zone, hammering away at a shield that radiated a blue glow. It was crafted from insulation steel, a rare material that blocks magic. Or actually originated from the Luika territory itself. A strikingly bright blue mineral. I've been hoarding supplies for 2 whole years, without ever finding a reason to use them, but now was finally paying off big time. Biglin's attributes had leveled up from all his non-stop grinding. His loyalty rating was maxed out at 100, and he still retained those unique abilities, granted to an heir of the Forge of Courage. The moment his hammer came down for the final strike, the crafting was done, and he raised the shield with pure pride, standing at roughly half the height of a man. It marked his very first anti-magic masterpiece. Catching sight of me, he gave a sudden flinch. "My lord, I had no idea you were dropping by." I shrugged it off and immediately brought up the shield. He instantly puffed out his chest. Any frontline soldier equipped with this gear will be totally untouched by incoming spells, cast by mid-tier sorcerers or below. Hell, even against an elite mage's blast, this thing could easily keep them alive. It provided mind-blowing defense against incoming arrows, swords, and sorcery, a true all-in-one package. See, spellcasters have limited mana pools, so once their attacks just bounce right off these bulwarks, they are completely sitting ducks. 0 heavy armor, and absolutely no physical muscle without their arcana. Strip away magic, and their punch bags compared to standard grunts. "What's your production quota for this winter season?" I inquired, assuming the insulation steel supply holds up. "Roughly 1,000. Giving his shoulder a firm pat, I smiled. "Awesome job. You'll get a bonus of 2 silver coins per unit." His eyes instantly beamed. Settling down in the Lukka region had treated him incredibly well. Reliable employment, solid meals, and plenty of cider. Honestly, his single real grievance was the severe lack of dwarf women. The local human ladies around here were way too leggy for his liking. Don't even ask, it's strictly a height preference. Then, on a serene morning, just as the winter frost dissolved, emergency smoke columns began curling up from the outposts. By the rhyming river, I leaped out of bed. "Lulu, help me get dressed, quick." A scout was already on one knee, waiting on me. "Sir, the beast folk are launching an attack. They've deployed massive canoes onto the water, pulled by water rhinos, and they're crossing right now." The Rama River was meant to be a natural defense, with its rapid currents and carnivorous fish. Yet, the beast folk had broken in massive water rhinos, with hides so incredibly thick that nothing could pierce them. Those monsters hauled their giant canoes straight to the other side. "How many?" I demanded, my stomach dropping. "Way too many to count, sir. They're absolutely everywhere." I called for action and anchor right away. Since Norl wasn't here, they were my top officers. They showed up fully armored. Looking grim, they'd spotted the smoke signals as well. "Action, take the 1,000 heavy cavalry, and strike the beastmen before they can assemble on the bank. Give them one hard charge, then fall back immediately." "Understood, sir." "Anchor, lead 5,000 troops into the woods. Set up traps. Excavate trenches and erect barricades right before the walls." "Yes, sir." I scaled the battlements myself. Having a nobleman on the front lines fires up the troops, and I needed a clear view of the field to direct the fight. Far off, the typically muddy yellow Rima River was crawling with beastmen, making landfall on the shores. They were armed with massive shields and scimitars. Thousands had already landed, with plenty more on the way. The chieftain of the beastmen was named Monliet. He had struck a bargain with Michelle. The third prince had taken over Blackstone Fortress and intended to unlock the gates from within. The moment the beast folk host arrived, they'd received intel from Yad and Rima, revealing that a mere 50,000 royal guards were left in the capital. Monley rushed the schedule, striking right as winter ended, instead of holding off until April. He figured they could punch straight through to the capital before anyone could even react. Of course, he had zero intention of actually putting Michelle on the throne. That idiot seriously believed 20,000 beastmen were his buddies. The beast folk actually intended to seize the lands for themselves, but Manley hadn't factored us in. He heard the thundering hooves before spotting a thing. The ground trembled as 1,000 heavy cavalrymen stormed his landing zone. His dog-faced troops had barely stepped on his solid ground. "Form up! Shields up!" He screamed, but it was far too late. They couldn't even ready their anti-cavalry pikes in time. Before action's riders plowed into them, like wolves tearing into a flock of sheep. The massacre was over in a flash. Thousands of those canine beastmen were butchered, without taking down a single rider. Action pulled back to the city walls right away, following my exact orders. Hit them once, then fall back. No getting greedy. Manly wiped a cold sweat from his brow. His immediate thought was that Michelle had double-crossed them. But no, the intelligence was accurate. The bulk of Nora's forces were indeed stationed near Rima, managing the new territories. So where on earth did this elite heavy cavalry come from? Their equipment was mind-blowing. Glowing blue shields that resembled enchanted armor, and top-tier blades. Gear like that should only belong to Z. Looks personal elite guards. He spotted the deserted watchtowers by the coast, with smoke trails still drifting up. Those outposts caught wind of his troops early on, buying us the time to ambush them. Whoever orchestrated this defense knew their stuff, and they had guts. Throwing a mere 1,000 cavalry at 200,000 beastmen took serious balls. Since when did that fat count? St. Martin, recruit such a badass knight? Manly spat onto the dirt. Hold up. Could that old geezer even afford this many heavy riders, let alone watchtowers with smoke signals? He had zero clue the old count was history. This old territory was mine now. High Priest Monliad, is your intel garbage? A massive, dog-headed beastman, standing over 2 meters tall, and wielding a massive axe glared right at Monliad. His name was Nethers, and he was ticked off about the dead soldiers, strewn all over the riverbank. Monliad fired back that his info was spot on, pointing directly toward the watchtowers and smoke signals. General Nethers, relying on raw power alone, doesn't make you a real tactician. The master of St. Martin Fortress had clocked their arrival before they even hit land. He was positive now that the stronghold had a new ruler. The chubby old Count St. Martin would never have had the brains to set up these watchtowers or give a knight that kind of leeway. The woods up ahead were likely rigged with traps too. Roughly 50,000 beastmen had made landfall by now, while another 150,000 were still crossing. Monliad dispatched 1,000 dog-headed grunts to scout the path ahead, with wolf riders providing backup, and sent scouts to recon my fortress, to scout out the nearby Lancer fort, as a backup plan in case my lines proved too tough. Bypassing us would cost them a whole day, but they had to strike Blackstone Fortress, while they still had the upper hand of surprise. Nether just scoffed at Monliad's paranoia, as if some tiny woods could have traps, capable of halting beastfolk warriors. Leaping onto a massive wolf, he brandished his axe and bellowed, "Listen up, the human realm lies straight ahead. Storm the place and claim their women." Thousands of wolf riders let out a roar, and stampeded straight toward the woods. From atop the ramparts, I watched the wolf cavalry blitz forward. These massive beasts wore bits of iron plating, capable of outsprinting horses, in short bursts, though they'd burn out fast. Still, the wolves were just the opening act. The actual army spanned the entire horizon right behind them. We had rigged the forest with traps, but we simply ran out of time to make them truly lethal. Down below the ramparts, Anchor had deployed 5,000 guards in a tight shield wall, behind a row of barricades. We were low on spears. Only the front few hundred troops actually had them. The rest were armed with Biglin longswords. I ordered the 50 heavy crossbows to hold fire. Their ammunition was scarce, and I had to save those bolts for high-priority targets. Archers, get ready. My 1,000 bowmen, equipped with hardened iron-tipped arrows, stood poised along the battlements. The wolves had their vitals protected by armor, but the rest of their hides were completely bare. These volleys were going to sting. Suddenly, the forest traps snapped shut. Agonized wolf howls rang through the trees, yet it barely even dented their onslaught. Before long, the initial wave of wolf riders stormed into sight. Down beneath the ramparts, my sentries clutched their weapons, their expressions grim. If this barricade collapsed, those savage beastmen would butcher every single guy and capture every woman. Once the wolf riders crossed into firing range, I brought my arm down in a swift motion. Loose! 1,000 bows snapped in perfect unison, sending arrows curving across the sky. Those high-grade iron tips shredded right through the oncoming riders. Hundreds of them bit the dust in that very first volley. The scattered few who broke past were instantly struck down by my blade and spear-wielding guards. Within moments, that menacing wolf cavalry that had charged in so confidently completely lost their nerve and scrambled back out of range. They never suspected a frontier region would be packed with archers, wielding premium iron-tipped arrows. Nether snarled, his feral, hound-like eyes burning with pure rage. In a matter of minutes, nearly a third of his entire Wolf Rider unit had been wiped out. His furious roar reverberated through the woods. Manhwa, you swore this wasn't a setup. Manhwa just sneered at Nether for rushing in like a fool, and the hot-headed commander nearly took his battle axe to the priest, recollecting just in time that the guy was a master of magic. Nether angrily demanded to know how the human forces could possibly be waiting for them, when this was supposed to be a total ambush. Manhwa had offered no explanation, keeping his eyes locked on my fortification. Fortified ramparts, thousands of marksmen, thousands of heavily armed sentries stationed below, alongside defensive blocks and trenches, not to mention the shock cavalry waiting inside. This stronghold was going to be a tough nut to crack. He signaled for the heavy shield bearers to move out. Massive iron bulwarks, hefted by teams of 2 or 3 canine beastmen, steadily formed into slow-advancing blocks. Safely massed behind those shields, they concealed their battering rams. Had those battering rams hit our gates, while my troops were caught up battling down below, the wolf riders would have swooped right back in. I spotted the issue straight away. Our arrows couldn't scratch those massive iron shields, and the rams just kept rolling closer. "Sir, let me take the riders and smash their lines." Action stepped up, and he was dead right. Only heavy cavalry could shatter the shield wall and stop the rams. "Go," I ordered, "for the glory of Luca." This onslaught wasn't going to be like the first one. Those beastmen were ready with spears and curved blades, right behind their barricade. We were in for some real casualties this time. We locked horns all day, from dawn till dusk. The cavalry slammed into them time after time, wrecking their defensive lines and keeping the rams well away from our walls. A few times they damn near broke through, but we stood firm. By the end of it, half of my heavy horsemen were gone. Every single survivor was bleeding. Thousands of my top-tier guards lay dead at the base of the walls. Sure, we'd wiped out about 5,000 beastmen, a hell of a body count ratio, but their sheer numbers were insane. Tens of thousands more were waiting just past the woods, with another 150,000 still making their way across the river. The stench of blood and iron blanketed the whole of Luca. Wounded soldiers were groaning. Civilians were weeping. Just a few days back, these exact same guys were dancing around the campfire, sharing laughs and singing tunes. Now, so many of them were just cold bodies. It hit me like a ton of bricks. War was way more brutal than I'd ever dreamed. But I steeled my gaze. Loss was part of the price. I was a nobleman, while aristocrats were bound to defend their domains. I had dispatched an ISU scout, speeding toward the capital with a critical dispatch. He rode so hard his mount collapsed and died en route, making it to the city limits by dusk. Yet the palace guard blocked him right there, claiming the sovereign was occupied. Try again in a couple days, though they hid the real truth, that His Majesty was actively ghosting any word from my camp. The scout was clueless about the bad blood between Zillik and me, so he just waited at the entrance, completely lost until Count Pharos spotted the Zillik, house insignia embroidered on his gear. Pharos had literally just gotten back from the new territories to stock up on rations when the scout broke the news that a massive horde of beastmen was swarming Luca. Even Pharos was totally thrown off. "Head to the Magic Academy," Pharos ordered. "Find Duchess Arya. She's the only hope Luca has left." Pharos read between the lines perfectly. He knew full well the king would gladly let me get slaughtered by those beast folk forces, because even if Luca crumbled, Zillik assumed Blackstone Fortress would easily hold out. "Arya was my last shot." I inquired, "Did you reach her without getting delayed?" The poor messenger was totally panicked, struggling to even form a proper sentence. But he still managed to lay out Luca's dire crisis, clear enough that Arya's expression immediately darkened, while Saruka, who was standing right there, fumbled and dropped her chalice to the floor. Linway was in deep trouble. For the beast folk to launch a full-scale assault meant a force of at least 100,000 strong. Saruka understood my character well enough to realize I'd fight to my final breath, protecting the hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians, sheltering behind my ramparts. She had to reach me. Having a potent mage backing me up would be a total game-changer. She was just about to bid Arya farewell when her mentor cut in. "Hold on." Saruka's eyes were already welling up. "Master, he's in serious trouble. I've got to go." Arya gave a gentle shake of her head. "I never said you couldn't leave." Reaching beneath the table, she pulled out a dark, crimson wooden chest. Tucked inside were a magical staff and a folded enchanted cloak. This staff belonged to me back in my youth. Its embedded crystal hoards magical energy, so it'll help you save up and stockpile your power. Plus, this cloak absorbs the ambient mana right out of the air to speed up your spellcasting. A master mage can't hit the road without the right gear. Saruka offered a low bow. Arya was the one person who cherished her most in the world. Aside from me, Master, if I managed to return in one piece, An unseen force silenced her before she could finish. Arya offered a warm smile. Go on, take my carriage. It's the quickest ride at the academy. As Saruka faded into the distance, Arya took a sip of the tea her pupil had prepared. It was always flawless whenever Saruka brewed it. Yet right now, the flavor felt a bit off. She usually steered clear of No-Ran's political affairs. But the fact that my scout had a rush here for backup revealed precisely what sort of path the Duke had chosen. Gazing out over the tranquil campus grounds, she knew No-Ran was decaying. She had sworn to her very first student that she would safeguard the growth and success of this realm. She had failed to keep that oath. Meanwhile, at Luca, a pair of blood-red moons hovered above. Blazing torches illuminated every single inch of my ramparts. The onslaughts from the beast folk had finally quieted down, thanks to Rukshin's riders wiping out over 1,000 of their battering rams with relentless charges. Stripped of battering rams, the beastmen posed no threat to the gates, allowing my guardsmen to finally retreat to the ramparts, where our hoarded boulders and timber could finally be utilized, but the toll was absolutely brutal. Out of my 1,000 heavy cavalrymen, scarcely 100 survived, and every single one was battered. Some had even lost limbs. They slumped against the stone structures, their dressings completely blood-soaked. We only had around 10 clerics in the entirety of Luca, all novices with pretty mediocre restoration spells. They could only prioritize troops with severe, yet ultimately survivable injuries. Fatal wounds were just way beyond their capabilities. The enemies. Spellcasters struck during the initial cavalry charges, but our insulated steel shields managed to hold firm. Following that failure, those mages fell back, realizing our bulwarks were completely magic-proof. They stayed well out of sight, positioned where our longbowmen and crossbows couldn't target them. My own archers suffered 0 casualties, but 2,000 guards lay dead, with another 1,000 heavily wounded. I had roughly 6,000 combatants left on the field. On the flip side, we'd taken out over 2,000 wolf riders, 5,000 shield bearers, and smashed 1,000 rams. That's nearly 10,000 beastman losses in a single day. An incredibly heavily favored kill ratio. But their total numbers were so overwhelming that it barely even made a dent. I couldn't grasp why. They were so hell-bent on breaching my specific domain. At this current tempo, we wouldn't last more than a handful of days. I was well aware of Blackstone Fortress guarding our rear. Knowing Ziluk, he'd likely ignore our pleas for reinforcements. Even so, retreating just wasn't an option. Sure, I could easily escape back to my previous barony, but the hundreds of thousands of civilians living in New Luca had absolutely nowhere to run. If I abandoned them, they'd face the beast folks' blades completely defenseless. Provided there was even a shred of hope, I wasn't about to give up on them. Shattered weapons and corpses were stacked high outside the ramparts. Yet neither side dared to clear the zone. The stench of blood and iron hung heavy in the air. Among the beast folk, Nethers was absolutely furious with Manhwa. Why did your sorcerer strike just once and then vanish? ManhwaCapped, with a cold reminder that my cavalry were carrying anti-magic shields. Keeping up the magical barrage would only turn his mages into sitting ducks for my archers and crossbowmen. He was also deeply unsettled that I could outfit 1,000 riders with such high-tier gear. He suspected I was holding back even stronger cards that hadn't been played yet. Having spent the entire day scouting from afar, he noted that, even though they had taken down roughly 3,000 of my troops, the forces defending the wall never seemed to deplete. Without knowing the true extent of my power, he saw no sense in pressing on with blind offensives. Manhwa's scouts then returned from Lancer Fortress, bearing excellent news. Just 2 ballistas mounted on the walls. No guard towers, and fewer than 2,000 troops holding it. He chose to bypass us entirely with the main host. Nethers, however, refused to budge. He demanded 20,000 vanguard ironclad troops, swearing he would breach Luca on his own, while Manhwa led the rest toward Lancer. They clashed bitterly, and Manhwa even leveled his staff at Nethers. But when the dust settled, the priest moved out with the bulk of the army, secretly wishing the brainless general would meet his end right here. The moment Manhwa pulled out, Nethers threw his forces into action immediately. A wave of 20,000 armored, hound-faced beastmen bearing massive tower shields and scaling ladders charged directly in my defensive lines. They brought no battering rams this time, just sheer brute strength and siege ladders. Their roars resonated through the land. My heavy bows shot missile after missile, but 50 defense pieces couldn't plug every breach. Assault ladders hit the ramparts all around. Anchor urged me to find some cover. No way. My troops have been grinding for over 12 hours. Standing right here would boost their morale. Bailing wasn't an option. Then we spotted something far worse. Assault catapults rolling up on the horizon. If we failed to take those out, the soldiers on the battlements would be ripped apart. Commander, let me handle this. Auction's gaze burned with embers and rage. The horsemen were down to less than 100 troops. Every single one injured. But if those war machines kept firing, the stronghold would fall in no time. Sir, I'll lead the vanguard to clear a path for the riders. Anchor stepped up to join as well. I fell quiet for a brief second. I placed my hand on Auction's shoulder. Ride out for the honor of Luica. He struck his chest with his fist. For the honor of Luica. I knew his odds of making it back were basically nil. Battered horsemen rushing through a wall of steel. Heavily clad monsters just to reach artillery. Defended by even more battalions. It was practically a one-way trip. A gentle hand gripped mine, my lord. I will guard you, Reyna muttered softly, clutching her blade and buckler. Saying nothing, I simply observed. The portals swung open. Anchor guided thousands of defenders straight into the horde, massed around the fortifications, cutting and carving to force a breach. When the right moment hit, Auction hoisted his steel blade high. Riders, advance. Shielded by the volley from our archers and bowmen, the horsemen broke through toward the siege engines. Action made it to the first one, and sliced right through its cables and beams. Within seconds, it completely crumbled to pieces. But before he could celebrate, beastmen flooded in from every single side, deprived of their charging momentum. The cavalry lost their biggest upper hand. There was no retreat. Seeing red, he roared, "Brothers, fight to the bitter end." One after another, the catapults went down, but so did the horsemen. From hundreds, they were whittled down to barely 30. Then Nethers himself burst through the mob, like a human battering ram. He plowed into a warhorse with such force. The beast collapsed on the spot. He brandished his gigantic axe, and cleaved a fully armored rider straight in two. Plate, flesh, and everything. "Damn humans," he growled. "You're gonna pay for this." He locked eyes on Action and sprinted right at him. Axe raised high. Action didn't even notice it coming. Nethers bore down on him like a walking siege engine, wielding that massive axe, with enough power to slice a man in two. Action raised his insulated steel shield, but the impact threw him clean off his mount. He spat up blood. It felt like he'd been struck by a dragon. His internals were wrecked from just a single hit. He bared his teeth and brought up his blade. But Nethers was already on top of him. A blow to the chest sent him flying. His sword couldn't even leave a scratch on Nethers' armor. As the axe swung down for the killing blow, Ukshin's mind began to wander. He flashed back to the morning he first saw Biddy, what he'd wiped out during drills, checking on him with genuine concern, using that incredibly soft tone of hers. He'd seriously never seen such a gorgeous woman. The guy fell for her right on the spot. Yet, he never managed to properly confess his feelings. He was fully aware she belonged to me. Knowing a mere squad leader, had absolutely no business bringing up stuff like that. Still, I handled it pretty gently. I told him to go in some glory and gold, so that one day he could face her with his head held high. As his sight blurred, the incoming axe loomed closer, and the chaotic noise of combat began to fade. He cast one final glance at the ramparts of Lucca, shining brightly in the firelight. A home he'd never returned to, fighting for Lucca's sake. The moment that final Lucca heavy cavalryman was swallowed up by the massive horde of dog-headed troops, my eyes filled with pure rage. Akin had earned more than enough honor tonight for knighthood. I really should have dubbed him before ordering him out there. I ought to have knighted the guy right then and there. With the gates shut, the siege ladder assaults grew fiercer. An endless wave of beastmen scaled the walls. But my personal guards repelled them time after time. Reyna stood right by my side, slaughtering any beastman that dared step close. Mystic scales began creeping over her skin, while a deep frost rippled out from under her feet. She had transformed back into the White Enchantress, acting as an unbreakable shield beside me. The brutal clash dragged on through the night, when a signal horn finally blared out, prompting the beastmen to beat a retreat. They had thrown away over 5,000 more soldiers, left completely without rams or heavy catapults. My mounted troops had smashed their entire arsenal. Simple ladders alone weren't going to breach these defenses. Nether was definitely starting to kick himself for not sticking with Monliard at Lancer Fortress. I watched from the ramparts at daybreak, staring at the worn-out beastmen, resting way out there. In just a single day and night, 5,000 of my troops had perished. The remaining men were bruised and battered, though the beastmen took a way worse beating. Their corpses were piled high below the fortifications. Our superior gear and fortified strongholds gave us the upper hand. In the casualty count, still something fell off. The enemy horde seemed smaller than before. Only 2 routes lead from the Rima River into Nor, and either my lands with its broad highways, or the extended path past Lancer Fortress, governed by a left faction earl. Did the main bulk of the Beastman horde head that way? If so, Lancer's defenses couldn't hold a candle to mine. They'd smash right through and push toward Blackstone Fortress, No-Ran's ultimate defensive line. But I quickly brushed the thought aside. No-Ran's survival wasn't my concern. That mess belonged to Xylix. Had the Beastmen left my province alone, I wouldn't have bothered to intervene. But if they intended to cross Luka territory, that was absolutely out of the question. If they wanted to fight, I'd bring it to the bitter end. Meanwhile, over in old Luka territory, Norrell spotted something unusual that morning. Not a single traveling merchant had arrived, even though there was usually a massive queue. He flagged down a passing peddler and found out that the Beastman army had overrun Lancer Fortress and was currently advancing on Blackstone. The peddler urged him to tell his master to run. Norrell realized the truth instantly. With the Beastmen across the Rima River, my own land was taking the brunt of the assault. Since they went around us, it meant we were already locked in a brutal clash. He chose to take 3,000 troops and rush over to back me up, leaving only 500 veteran guards stationed at Luika. Nether's forces had been pounding us for 3 straight days, with 20,000 soldiers, yet they couldn't breach the defenses. He had dropped more than 10,000 men, while our own casualties kept dropping, without any battering rams or catapults. Mere ladders weren't enough to take our ramparts. Narencel, our half-elf archmage, had been absolutely wrecking their assaults with gale magic, blasting waves of dog soldiers right off the parapets. Still, he couldn't keep fighting day in and day out. He required downtime to recharge his mana reserves. From his vantage point, Nether stared at our walls for 2 whole days, completely baffled as to why my men's morale remained so high, even after suffering thousands of losses. But then he clocked it. There I was, standing on the wall in aristocratic attire, composedly issuing directives with Reyna protecting me. That was the secret. Their lord was holding the line right beside them. Nethers licked his fangs. Take out the noble, and the human morale would totally shatter. He deployed a handful of elite officers, each packing combat ratings around 90, to keep Reyna distracted while he set up his actual strike. Those commanders stormed up the ladder, heading straight for me. Reyna stepped out in front, her eyes flashing red with draconic slits. Powerful as they were completely outclassed by her combat rating of 168. She cut through the first guy in a heartbeat, before moving to wipe out the rest. And that was the exact window Nethers wanted. While Reyna had her hands full, he gripped a battle axe and hurled it right at me, pouring in all his might. My eyes were glued to the Beastman, ranks below, blindsiding me completely. By the time I realized, a whirling axe already dominated my field of vision. Is this the end for me? That crossed my mind first. Deflecting a blow that massive was just impossible. The weapon struck, yet the expected spray of blood and guts never materialized. Tucked away, Fiddy's amulet burst into a blinding radiance, manifesting a shield that soaked up the lethal strike. Even so, the sheer force hurled me backward, clearing the rampart. Wind howled past my ears. As I plummeted from that immense height, my body crashed violently into the dirt on the far side. Then, total darkness. Lady Reyna's shriek pierced right through the war zone. The second I fell, whatever transpired next, I only pieced together afterward. The moment I hit the dirt and my breathing stopped, something inside Reyna just broke. A wild, uncontainable surge of glacial energy flared out from her. Flakes started drifting from above, right in mid-spring. Her gaze locked dead onto Nether, the bastard who'd cut me down. She vanished from the wall like a phantom, slicing every single beastman in her way straight in half. Crossing hundreds of meters in a mere heartbeat, she brought her blade down on Nether. He parried with his enchanted axe, shattering her iron sword into shards. That gashed her face, but that only fueled her rage. The dragon spirit's blessing triggered. Her horns extended, her tail emerged, and she punched clean through his spellbound plate. Defenses built to shrug off heavy crossbow bolts. The blow sent him skidding away. For the first time in his existence, the arrogant beastfolk commander actually considered fleeing. Right then, a thundering herd of hooves rattled the ground. Norrell had finally shown up, leading thousands of heavy cavalry straight from Old Luca, plowing right into the beastman's rear flank without a second thought. Meanwhile, an absolute unit of a fireball far bigger than any spell those beastmen had ever faced, came hurtling off the walls and crashed into their tightest ranks, wiping out hundreds of them in one massive explosion. Saruka had made it. A true master of magic had officially joined the fray. Nether completely lost his nerve to keep fighting. With Reyna hunting him down and spells raining from above, he just grabbed his battle axe and hightailed it out of there. The moment someone yelled that their commander had bolted, the remaining 5,000 beastmen completely crumbled into a frantic, chaotic retreat. Noral's riders hunted them down ruthlessly, but Reyna couldn't care less about winning the battle. She sprinted right to where I collapsed, screaming my name over and over again. Her draconic features had fully manifested once more. Aria's cloaking spell had completely shattered. She came across me, pooling in blood, totally motionless and quiet. Saruka followed close behind and saw me too. She fell straight to her knees, looking like her entire world had just fallen apart. He won't. He can't be. Saruka scrambled over to my side, throwing all her composure out the window. Reyna gathered me up in her arms and checked for a heartbeat. It was there, but barely, incredibly weak and slipping away fast. Saruka, go find a healer. Please move. But right then, Saruka recalled a piece of advice Arya had shared before. Dragons were capable of binding symbiotic pacts with mortals. Reyna's blood, even coming from a half-blood dragon, possessed an immense, vital energy. It could keep me tethered to life, at least for the time being. Reyna didn't waste a single moment hesitating. She bit down hard on her own finger and guided the flowing blood straight into my mouth. Crimson tears streamed down her face as she cradled me close. Master, you gotta pull through. Please don't go leaving Reyna all alone. While I was completely out cold, the rest of the world kept on spinning. Yuruna Kesha served as the Holy Maiden of the Noran Church, a prominent figure whom the rulers of all three kingdoms were obligated to treat with utmost reverence. The clergy's ranks ascended from minor and mid-tier priests up to the high priests, followed by bishops and archbishops. Yet, the Holy Maiden outranked every last one of them. Only a single maiden could hold office at any given time, possessing the authority to command every cleric. Throughout Norans, Yad, and Rima, even the beast folk, the elves, and the ocean tribes of distant continents showed deference to the church. No one dared cross a non-aligned faction that held a monopoly on healing. Her great-grandfather, Helen Kesha, had been celebrated as the realm's premier Grand Mage, personally mentored by Arya herself. Her mother was the previous Holy Maiden, a deeply cherished healer. Yuruna inherited both her great-grandfather's boundless mana reserves and her mother's deep empathy and unparalleled mending arts. She could perform wide-scale restoration and could even regenerate severed limbs. As long as a person drew even the faintest breath, she could save them, not by reversing death itself, but by snatching them from its brink. Clergymen remained off-limits, even amidst warfare. All three human realms strictly honored that code. After all, making enemies out of healers, in an era with such rudimentary medicine, was practically signing your own death warrant. To enforce this neutral status, the church deployed well over 1 million white-armored sentinels. Anyone foolish enough to insult the Holy Maiden would have to answer to them. Arya had sent a letter to Yuruna, requesting that she visit Luke, some land, and rescue a dying nobleman. Lady Irina actually knew of me already, the guy who bagged 2 Rama Royals, plus the genius behind Cream, which she'd lately gotten super hooked on. Since Arya was the one asking, she couldn't say no. She made sure her outfit was flawless. A Holy Maiden always needs to look pristine. Then she exited the cathedral, flanked by her white-armored guard. Outside, everything was descending into absolute chaos. The beast folk had completely shattered Blackstone Fortress. Michelle's backstabbing had played out perfectly, and now the capital was taking a beating. Barely a few thousand troops, and the Griffin Knights were left to hold the line. And the sounds of combat were already dying down. Xylik and his main force were cut off miles away, bogged down by surprise raids from Rima and Yad. The capital was totally doomed. Refugees were packing the streets. Yuruna saw them everywhere she looked. Entire families escaping properties that were perfectly safe. Just yesterday, a few lucky souls found safety near the church, where the white-clad sentries kept the beastmen at bay. But most faced either execution or chains. She had a simple, dull gray band on her finger, handed down directly from her mother. Her mom used to tell her that once she crossed paths with her soulmate, the ring would radiate blue and change shape, exactly like it did when her parents first met. It could channel massive pools of mana and seriously cut down chanting times. Ever since her father passed, the band had lost its color, Urena had never seen it spark for anyone. Royal princes, prodigy sorcerers, elite alchemists, they'd all try to shoot their shot. But none of them did a thing for her. She could see right through their greedy motives, and it totally bored her. The Holy Maiden Luca's domain is right ahead. A knight in white armor reported. I'm aware, she replied softly. I had been totally out cold for 5 days, clinging to life with a pulse so weak that Yahello, Reyna, and Saruka genuinely feared I was already gone. The three of them refused to leave my side, not even for a split second. Reyna's draconic constitution withstood the exhaustion, but Yahello and Saruka looked drained, with sunken eyes. They barely touched food, their eyes bloodshot from weeping, while Reyna's blood kept me tethered to this world. It was merely a temporary fix. Without proper medical care, I was a goner. Fortunately, Arya had managed to contact the church's holy maiden, Urena Kesha. She stood as the most potent healer across the entire continent. Her great-grandfather was actually the greatest archmage Arya had ever personally trained, and her mother had served as the previous holy maiden. Urena could mend anything short of absolute death, even regenerating severed limbs. Provided a person drew even a single breath, she could pull them back from the brink. Meanwhile, Enkuna had been comforting Saruka, who ultimately broke down, sobbing in her embrace. I'm terrified he won't snap out of it. Enkuna tenderly stroked her hair. He won't abandon us. He'll guide us toward a brighter future. Enkuna realized that, through me, the Loop domain had truly become her home. The place where her friends and family lived since she had nowhere else to turn. The moment the butler signaled the Holy Maiden's arrival, hope gripped everyone in the room. Ureno stepped inside, wearing an apologetic smile. Did I miss the window? She cast a glance toward Saruka. So this was the new student Arya took on. A cat girl, probably hailing from the Nash tribe. Then her gaze shifted to me, passed out on the mattress. Fair play. Even she had to admit I was pretty good looking, even if I did look like a literal corpse right now. Hovering her hand right over me, she checked my vitals. My life was hanging by a thread, kept alive by some intense force. She scowled, anxious it might be some shady alchemical drug, the kind with nasty side effects. That could totally mess with her restoration spells. Just as she asked about it, Reyna spoke up. I let him drink my blood. Urena visibly relaxed upon spotting Reyna's tail and horns. Dragon blood. Okay, that worked. Mind you, if Reyna had been a purebred dragon, that essence by itself might have completely overwhelmed my fragile body. But a half-breed dragon's blood was totally doable. Pulling on a pair of white gloves, she channeled her healing arts. A soothing, pale radiance washed all over me, and a bit of color finally crept back into my cheeks. Still, my heartbeat remained dangerously faint. She had to pull out the big guns. She put on the muted gray ring her mother had passed down to her. It was a reflex whenever she cast high-tier recovery magic. Suddenly, she triggered an incredibly potent surge of holy energy. The glare proved so blinding that everyone had to shield their eyes. Beads of perspiration began forming on Urena's brow. Even for a powerhouse of her caliber, a massive healing spell like this ate up huge chunks of mana. Bit by bit, my heart rhythm evened out. My respiration stabilized, making her let out a relieved sigh. I was out of the woods. She was just about to put the ring away when something caught her eye. The band had shifted to blue, this plain gray piece that had never once responded to anyone. Not to royalty, nor to prodigy sorcerers, nor elite alchemists, was suddenly radiating a rich, spellbinding azure glow. It was warm to the touch, exactly as her mother had described. Just like that first time she saw it as a kid. The ring was supposed to shift colors. The moment she ran into her soulmate, Urena's mind went completely blank as she gazed at me, still totally passed out on the bed, while her heart fluttered with utter confusion. This guy? This Viscount? Sure, he was pretty impressive. But compared to her own family status, he wasn't anything major, even if he was pretty easy on the eyes. She couldn't help but wonder who I really was. After a long silence, she tossed a question to the girls that caught every single one of them off guard. Is your Viscount married? They all just stared back at her, clueless. Yahello recovered first. The young master isn't married, no. No wife, and no concubines either. He only just turned 18. Urena quietly let out a soft sigh of relief. Then she eyed the cluster of gorgeous girls gathered around my bed, with a slightly skeptical expression. This Viscount guy definitely seemed to be a magnet for beautiful women. Look after him well. He ought to snap out of it soon. Without another word, she headed out of the room, following close behind the butler down the corridor. I felt like I'd been floating through an endless void for ages, until a warm sensation finally reeled me back in. By the time I managed to open my eyes, I could barely move, but I felt something warm against my hand. Alilu had been holding on to it the entire time. Reina and Saruka were fast asleep, slouched against my mattress. They all looked completely wiped out. It hit me. The X-Body's dragon amulet had actually saved my life. With that sudden flash of white light. Still, the blast had blasted me right off the rampart. A plunge from that height had almost finished me off. Glancing down at my hand, out of nowhere, my very own status panel finally popped up for once. Linwei. Combat. 5. Strategy 80. Special perks. Insane personal charisma. World Hopper. And high purity white dragon blood. Current status. Buffing recovery and battle stats. Overall rank. B-. A combat score of 5? Seriously? I was actually weaker than those elf kids I purchased. Stumbling right to death's door, opened my eyes. Slackassing my training just wasn't going to cut it anymore. In a place like this, I needed real power to keep myself safe. Lila was the first to catch me moving. Her eyes snapped open, instantly welling with tears. Young master, you're finally awake. I was terrified. Saruka and Reina woke up right after, sobbing in sheer relief like their own kid had beaten death. The holy maiden, Urina, stuck around the look of fiefdom for quite a few days. She patched me up and waited until I could manage on my feet, spending her downtime checking out my land. With pretty clear curiosity, she'd hit every corner of the 3 kingdoms, with her mom preaching the church's gospel, so she'd seen her fair share of noble fiefs. Yet she claimed mine didn't resemble any of them. The locals weren't starving or emaciated. They actually smiled, their eyes brimming with hope. It blew her mind that a backwater border fief pulled off something even the massive capital cities botched, ensuring that nobody went to bed hungry. Heading up to the ramparts, she took one look at the mountains of bodies, still being hauled away. The reek was absolutely brutal. It was obvious to her the beastmen took a massive beating here. By her reckoning, this clash was definitely one for the history books. A few thousand of my own troops, holding the line against a massive horde of 200,000. Plus, she saw I had a ton of injured troops that the local cleric couldn't manage, so she patched up as many as possible. She couldn't grasp why the capital had never replied to our pleas for backup. After mulling it over, she seemed to figure out what must have gone down with Michelle in Blackstone Fortress. Still, she didn't care about court politics. The moment she stepped off the wall, I was there waiting. I was still pretty shaken up, but I tracked her down on purpose. Offering a deep bow, I said, "Thanks for saving me." "Holy moiden." She offered a soft chuckle, flashing a pair of small dimples. She was gorgeous. Blonde hair, cascading straight down like a waterfall, and brown eyes checking me out closely. She had a killer figure that even her baggy white vestments couldn't mask. "Don't thank me, thank Duchess Arya." If she hadn't asked, I wouldn't have bothered. "I need to thank Arya as well," I replied, "but you're the one who actually pulled me through. That credit goes to you." Her face turned serious. "Then how are you going to repay me?" I froze. I definitely didn't expect the Holy Maiden to straight up demand compensation. Wasn't this the part of the conversation where we just swap pleasantries and call it a day? She was the Holy Maiden, after all. What would she possibly want from a guy like me? Name it. If it's something I can manage, consider it done. She tapped her cheek with a slender finger and grinned. "How about treating me to dinner? Grabbing a bite with a lady? That's a pretty good deal, right?" I was completely thrown off. I'd braced myself for some massive demand, except all she really wanted was dinner. "It'd be my absolute pleasure to host a lady for a meal," I replied, offering her a proper gentleman's bow. She chuckled, a sound reminiscent of silver bells. Yet, the way she kept locking eyes with me felt pretty bizarre, though not exactly aggressive. Just incredibly intense. The kitchen crew and head maid whipped up the feast. Roasted suckling pig, all golden and glistening. These weren't ordinary pigs, but ones raised on wheat and wild mushrooms, costing a whopping 200 gold pieces each. Pan-seared goose liver, plus 3 bottles of vintage wine, at a cool 1,000 gold coins a pop. Fluffy white bread paired with jams and rich cream. The entire spread set me back over 3,000 gold. The alcohol alone made up the bulk of it, and my wallet was definitely feeling the pain. Hands down the most lavish dinner of my life. It was just the two of us there. As the maid served, Urina dined with pure elegance, taking tiny bites and delicate sips. I did my best to stop gawing at her, but something just kept pulling my eyes back her way. So weird. I usually have solid immunity against gorgeous women. What was wrong with me? Once we finished eating, I lifted my glass once more. "Seriously, thanks again for saving my skin. If you ever need a favor, no matter what, I'll back you up without a second thought." She smirked. "You're still calling me Holy Maiden and acting all formal. Am I really that intimidating to talk to? She mentioned that her name was Yuruna Kesha and insisted I just call her Yuruna. Then she asked if she could call me Linwei. I agreed, though I was slightly baffled by where this was going. Next, she put on a show of being a bit tipsy, daintily pressing a hand to her forehead. Linwei, those maids and demi-human girls keeping you company. Every single one is gorgeous, right? They're on Luke's payroll. Just a territory, I said straight up. Ours is strictly a boss employee thing. And I meant it. Women only sluggish your blade work. That cracked her right up. She'd already crashed at my estate for days, soaking up all the maid's tea. Word around the house was, the young master was way too straight-laced, and hadn't even been with a girl yet. Even at 18, the locals wouldn't stop hyping me up. Honestly, she knew the deal before she even asked. Suddenly, her whole vibe shifted to dead serious. That whole tipsy front totally evaporated. Linwei, how would you feel about making me your wife? My mind completely short-circuited. It felt like 10,000 dragons stampeding through my head. Whoa, isn't this kind of out of nowhere? She seemed amused by how rattled I was. She casually dabbed her lips. If you're down for it. We could get engaged now and tie the knot in 2 years. Once we've gotten closer. I'm not pressuring you for an answer tonight. I hit the road tomorrow. Just hit me up whenever you've decided. Look, Rands is a total mess right now. But I give you my word. Those beastmen won't lay a finger on your lands. Standing up, she threw one final glance my way. A look so incredibly seductive it practically paralyzed me. Then she walked out. I just sat there, my brain completely fried. The church's holy maiden just popped the question to me. A woman who could pull anyone on this entire continent. Why me? Just because of my looks? I gave it some actual serious thought. Women really do sluggish your blade work. Yeah, but a wealthy chick doesn't. A wealthy woman upgrades her blade instead. Yurina was absolutely loaded, anyway. She had over 1 million white armored guards at her disposal. If we ever had a daughter, she'd basically be a lock to take over as the next holy maiden. Still, could a sweet deal like this really just land right on my lap? Was she plotting to harvest my organs, or what? Bright and early the next day, she had a quiet chat with the high priest, who was posted out in the Luka territory. Before taking off, the priest bowed and nodded like crazy, clearly making all sorts of promises. As I walked her out to the gates, she paused by her carriage and gave a warm smile. My proposition stands indefinitely, but don't keep a lady hanging for too long. That wouldn't be very gentlemanly. This wasn't just some tipsy rambling anymore. She meant every single word. I'll give your proposal some serious thought. Lady Urina, have a safe trip. Then, right in front of all my sentries, and her own white-armored escort, she stepped in close and wrapped me in a gentle hug. Everyone completely froze, my troops, her paladins, even my butler's jaw hit the floor. Well then, I'll be off. She caught me off guard with this lovely, crisp, subtle scent that uniquely belonged to the Holy Maiden. Once her carriage faded down the path, I just stood there for the longest time. My head was completely scrambled after Urina left. Suddenly it clicked. I'd completely forgotten to check her status window the entire time. Something had been messing with my head from the moment we sat for dinner until she finally left. Being near her gave me this bizarre vibe, like we'd met before. Despite us having just met, I brushed it off, looking forward to our next encounter. Little did I know, Urina had been casting a minor glamour on me. The entire time, a little trick from her mom. It just subtly nudged people to see her best side. Nothing malicious, and anyone with decent willpower could shrug it off. Effortlessly. She was shocked that I was barely unfazed, especially since I lacked any mana to shield myself. Honestly, she'd been playing it safe, scared of overplaying her hand. Riding in her carriage, a smile crossed her face, as she recalled an afternoon from way back, when she first crossed paths with me as a kid. A lifetime had passed since then. That young boy had transformed into a formidable lord capable of standing his ground. Meanwhile, back in the capital, my worst nightmare had finally materialized. The beastmen overran the entire city. Michelle's backstabbing paid off. He breached Blackstone Fortress from within, allowing them to flood right in. The Griffin Knights stood their ground to the last breath, all several thousand of them, taking down over 10,000 elite beastmen at a brutal 10-to-1 ratio. But they were simply outnumbered. Michelle stood amidst the fallen capital, absolutely livid. Monliad was already lounging on the throne, and when Michelle demanded they stick to the arrangement, grab the spoils and beat it, the priest just mocked him. Our sovereign commanded us to take the capital. My pact with you doesn't trump the crown's orders, unless you fancy taking on our legions. Michelle had wagered everything on the beastmen, taking massive casualties, which would have left his own 30,000 troops as the dominant power instead. They'd shown up with 200,000, and even after losing 70,000, they still had upwards of 130,000 men. His own 30,000 didn't stand chance. He'd rolled the dice and lost spectacularly. If the people of Norins ever found out that he'd let the beastmen through the gates, they would literally rip him apart. The beast folk were now occupying the capital, fortified behind high walls with over 100,000 troops. Even if Xylix's 150,000 soldiers managed to return, assuming they could break away from the Rima and Yad forces, currently pinning them down, taking the city back would be a total pipe dream. The beastmen intended to push outward from the capital, subjugating the noble territories one by one. Hundreds of thousands of citizens were forced into slavery. Only the neutral factions remained untouched. The church, backed by its million-strong white armor army, alongside the Magic Academy and the Alchemy Association, Monley lounged back on the throne, looking pretty pleased with himself. Yet one nagging thought bothered him. A whole week had passed since he took the city. So where was Nether's head? Had that idiot and his 20,000 elite soldiers actually been wiped out? At Luica? After Urania left, it suddenly hit me. I'd completely forgotten to check her status panel this whole time. Some kind of subtle influence had been messing with me. Whenever she was around, from dinner until she left, I felt this bizarre vibe, like I'd known her forever, even though we'd only just met. I brushed it off, figuring we'd cross paths again soon. What I didn't realize back then was that Urania had been weaving a minor charm spell on me. The entire time, a little trick her mother had taught her. It just made people appreciate her good qualities a bit more. Nothing malicious, and anyone with a shred of willpower could snap out of it. Through and through. She couldn't believe I was barely fazed by it, considering I lacked any mana to shield myself. Turns out, she'd been holding back, scared of overdoing the whole thing. Riding in her coach, she smirked a bit, recalling an afternoon from way back, when she first crossed paths with me as a kid. Man, time sure flies. That little youngster had become a true lord, who could totally hold his own. Meanwhile, back in the capital, my worst nightmare had become reality. The beastmen had captured the city. Michelle's double cross actually worked. He'd breached Blackstone Fortress from within, allowing them to flood right in. The Griffin Knights went down swinging, all several thousand of them, taking out 10,000 top beastmen at a wild 10-to-1 ratio. But they were just spread too thin. Michelle stood in the fallen capital, absolutely livid. Monliad was lounging right on the throne. And when Michelle insisted they stick to the plan, grab the spoils and jet, the priest straight up mocked him. Our sovereign commanded us to take the capital. Our little pact can't trump the king's orders, unless you fancy fighting our legions. Michelle had banked hard on the beastmen taking massive casualties, which would leave his 30,000 men as the dominant army around. Instead, they rolled up 200,000 strong, even losing 70,000 soldiers. They still retained well over 130,000. His 30,000 were chump change. He'd played his hand and lost big time. If the folks of Norins ever caught wind that he let the beastmen inside, they'd butcher him on the spot. The Beast Clan now controlled the capital, stationing over 100,000 troops behind massive fortifications. Even with Xylix's 150,000 troops made it back, if they managed to escape the Rima and Yad armies, holding them down. Winning back the city would be a total pipe dream. The beastmen intended to push out from the capital, overrunning the lands of the nobility one by one. Massive numbers of citizens were forced into bondage. Only the non-aligned factions remained safe. The church, backed by its million-strong white armor, alongside the Magic Academy and the Alchemist Guild, Manly kicked back on the throne, feeling pretty damn good about things. Yet, one detail kept bothering him. A whole week had passed since he took the city. So where the hell was Nether? Was that idiot and his 20,000 elite fighters actually wiped out entirely at Luica? Once the beastmen seized control of the capital, they butchered every single aristocrat in sight. The men were executed on the spot. Homely women were handed over to the grunts as slaves, and the beauties were saved for the Beast King's appraisal. In less than 7 days, the domain of every influential lord was completely ransacked, even Duke Simon's place. Noble bodies dangled from the ramparts right next to peasants. At the very least, commoners could serve as laborers, whereas aristocrats were viewed as worthless liabilities, meaning they all had to be put down. Monlay deployed 30,000 soldiers beyond the capital gates to seize control of the neighboring aristocratic lands. Right around then, a message arrived from his monarch, offering high praise and guaranteeing him personal fiefdoms once the war wrapped up. However, the letter concluded with a highly specific directive: steer completely clear of the Luca region. When Manly pulled out the map, and realized that the Luca zone matched up perfectly with where his advance was halted. A shiver of pure dread went right down his spine. Nethers could still be slugging it out there. He instantly opted to pin the whole rap on Nethers and completely wash his hands of the disaster. The point of that heads-up became crystal clear. Over at the Beast King's court, King Cash had gotten a couple of letters, one sent by the Succubus Kingdom and another from the Human Church, both demanding that Luca territory remain untouched. He couldn't just brush off these ultimatums. The Succubus Empress alone possessed terrifyingly brutal power. Plus, she had a frost dragon backing her up. Meanwhile, the Church commanded over 1 million white armored troops. Taking on either faction, let alone both together, will be total suicide, especially with rival beast clans, such as the Cat People and Lizard Folk, just waiting for him to slip up. Cash shot a message over to Manly Ed right away, commanding him to keep away from my territory. Just then, Nethers hobbled into the throne room, looking totally wrecked, with a massive gap blasted through his chest plate. He braced himself for punishment after getting beaten. But the king welcomed him with a heroic embrace instead, because since the capital city had fallen, every officer who took part got a slice of the glory. Nethers was granted the highly esteemed surname Genderfrost, a tribute claimed by less than 5 fighters. Throughout the entire history of the beast folk, Nethers was left completely baffled. He had suffered a total defeat, yet Manly had apparently captured the capital city, meaning his part in tying down Noran's top-tier troops was recognized as a critical assist. He shed tears of appreciation, pledging his lifelong allegiance. Meanwhile, word of Noran's downfall reached Body as well. She had already dispatched an official message through channels to keep me safe, clearing yet another debt of honor. The charm she gave me had successfully absorbed a lethal blow, precisely as she intended, regardless of whatever followed. She assumed she'd done enough. Her own succubus realm had finally settled down, following the uprising, meaning she had a ton of her own mess to deal with. So, that's why the Beastmen decided to leave my lands. Well alone, 2 of the absolute biggest heavy hitters around, the Holy Church and the Succubus Empress, had both marked Luca as completely off-limits. I was completely oblivious to all this back then, but there. Guardian Aegis would wind up being the ultimate safety net I'd ever count on. My body was bouncing back nicely, too. I could finally pull up my stats window whenever I felt like it. Kumba, Set, Tactics, 80. The dragon blood coursing from Reyna was constantly boosting my healing rate and physical power. 2 whole points added to combat just from that bloodline bump. Pretty wild considering I started out at a measly 5. That's nearly a 50% upgrade right there. If I could barely take down 1 chicken before, hey, maybe now I could take on 2.5. True to Yuruna's word, not a single beastman came near us for a solid week after her departure. Instead, a whole different headache hit us. Refugees, thousands of displaced souls, escaping the ruined capital and neighboring regions, began flooding straight toward Luca. Initially, I welcomed a few in, but the crowd just kept expanding. Within days, upwards of 50,000 exiles had camped out around my city walls. These folks weren't like my loyal townsfolk. They'd lost their loved ones, their homes, absolutely everything. And utter desperation triggers crime. Luca's once tranquil streets quickly grew tense and chaotic. Groups of refugees began raiding our grain crops and fruit groves located outside the gates. Poor little Shalice was absolutely buried in paperwork, just trying to keep a lid on it all. The displaced folks who couldn't make it inside just set up camp right against the walls, starting fires, foraging for wild roots, and pillaging our fields. If we let this keep up, they'd pick the land clean and leave us totally surrounded. I had to make a move. This crowd was a massive headache, but also a real shot. Botch it, and they'll start tearing the place apart. Play it right, and they become new residents who can actually beef up my domain. The stretch between the city ramparts and the Rima River was massive, plenty of room to erect a whole new town. But putting people out there meant leaving them exposed, should those beastmen ever push across the river again. And with a mere 4,000 guards left after the clash, I couldn't afford to spare any troops for their defense. So, I headed up to the wall. Saruka cast a gale enchantment to make my voice carry. I get that you've all been through hell, but that doesn't mean you could just steal. Lucas produced. I barked out Anchor's name. He advanced with dozens of heavily armored guards, dragged out the looters from the crowd, and shattered their limbs. Right then and there, a hush fell over the mob. By Noran law, I could have easily enslaved them. Breaking a few bones was actually letting them off easy. I will grant you a place to live, but if you cross my boundaries, you'll learn the hard way that a lord's honor isn't something you can just walk all over. A wave of dread washed over the masses. They'd grown cocky because I hadn't pushed back yet, but now they got the message. Then I dialed it back. That said, I'm no cruel tyrant either. I'll let you settle the plots between the walls of Luka and the Rama River, where you can build homes and cultivate crops. In return, you'll put in 8 hours a day, constructing barriers and defenses for my city. You'll get 2 meals a day. The crowd instantly erupted in grateful cheers. A pair of meals and a roof over their heads was far more than any of them had dared hope for. Little did they know, though, the territory I was handing over to them sat squarely in the crosshairs of any future Beastman assault. Until the new fortifications were up, these displaced folks would act as a human shield. For Luka, I had no intention of deploying my stretched thin troops to keep them safe. 2 meals a day was already way more generous than what any ordinary lord would ever grant. They'd never enjoy the same privileges as my original citizens, but it beat starving to death out in the wild, and it suited my plans down to the ground. The situation was far worse than I'd feared. The influx of refugees just wouldn't stop. It jumped from 10 or 20,000 to 50,000, and now into the hundreds of thousands. Their numbers multiplied by the day. This could only mean Noran's front lines had utterly fallen apart. The majority of the population had been captured or slaughtered by the Beastmen. The ones making it to my gates were the lucky few. More refugees meant more mouths to feed. My home territory used to have only 60 to 70,000 inhabitants, and now the newcomers completely outnumbered them. My payout cuts from the cream sales by the Far East Trading Company had completely dried up. It must have been wiped out in all the turmoil. I couldn't help but wonder if Vis was even breathing. He was right on the verge of becoming a Viscount, and now everything had gone up in smoke. If that cream recipe got exposed during the fighting, he legally owed me 1 million gold coins in breach fines, but that only mattered if he actually made it out alive. Rations were officially my biggest headache. I'd stashed away a lot, but not for a crowd this huge. I'd given my word on 2 meals a day, even if it was nothing but black bread. Backing out on that promise would totally tank my credibility. The refugees were already clearing out the woods between my ramparts and the Rima River to put up wooden shacks. The thick forest provided plenty of timber, but once the trees were wiped out, my hunters would lose their livelihood, and meat would eventually vanish from the markets. I needed to get fields cleared, and fast, so these folks could feed themselves. The soil near the riverbank was decent enough. At least, I could only pray. Our rations would hold out until the first harvest. Big Land was absolutely thriving. The battlefield had left us tons of steel and high-grade iron salvage from wrecked weapons and armor. His forge had expanded to hundreds of workers, with seasoned blacksmiths from Noran studying under him. His craftsmanship had reached a whole new level. He was now crafting weapons with unique traits, like armor-piercing and blade-snapping, perks that usually only showed up on enchanted gear. He pulled this off simply by blending in rare minerals. A standard sword went for 50 gold coins, but an armor-piercing one could pull in 500. These weapons demanded higher combat stats to wield, but after surviving that hellish clash, most of my sentries had reached level 50 or higher in their combat rating, with a few even hitting 60 or 70. My troops were actually stronger than the Royal Guard now. I bumped up a few top-tier soldiers to squad leaders to cover the vacancies. Anchor was officially dubbed a knight. Man, I wish Dixon could have been too. He'd more than earned it. Zillick was completely losing it. It never crossed his mind that the Beastmen could smash through Blackstone. While he was out conquering new territories, he desperately wanted to retreat, but the Yad and Rima armies kept him pinned down, forcing him to witness his empire collapse. His firstborn son had vanished, likely wiped out, along with the 50,000 Royal Guards and Griffin Knights, who had fought to the bitter end. He finally suspected Michelle of selling him out, though he couldn't quite bring himself to believe it. Duke Simon fed him exactly what he wanted to hear. That Michelle had surely been slaughtered, or taken hostage by traitors within his own ranks. Zillick chilled out a bit after that. He still commanded 300,000 troops, combined from the royal regiment and noble houses. As long as he drew breath, the No-Rans weren't finished. The newly captured lowlands and forests offered them some wiggle room, and, eventually, with no common No-Ran enemy to unite against, Yad and Rima would turn on each other, squabbling over how to divide the loot. The Beastmen had walked away with the grand prize, while Rima took a beating and Yad got absolutely nothing. That sort of friction was bound to spark a feud. Before long, summer rolled around once more. The displaced crowds had mostly found their footing. A few had set up homesteads in the woods, stretching between my ramparts and the Rima River, and the new defensive wall was rising steadily day by day. The Beastmen did show up on the opposite bank. On a few occasions, but they always marched straight toward the old Lancer outpost, completely ignoring our presence. True to what Irina had guaranteed, they left Luca completely alone. Still, I kept my guard up. Still, I had to grant that her opinion held serious sway. She'd been dropping me lines every once in a while, keeping the whole proposal low pressure, just checking in to see how I was, and sharing bits and pieces of her day. The timing was spot on, not too frequent. To be annoying, yet not so rare that she'd slip my mind. She knew exactly how to play it cool and keep her distance. Ever since my near-death experience, I've been grinding. Each morning, I hit the field with the troops for drills. My combat stats shot up from a measly 7 all the way to 20. The dragon blood buff finally wore off, once my body fully absorbed it, but the stat boost stuck around. I was still a lightweight compared to a real brawler, but I'm miles ahead of where I used to be. Get one more year, and I might actually cut it as a decent warrior. Granted, I only had time to practice, because little Shalice kept tackling the bulk of my paperwork. Invitations kept piling in from Feder's barony and various minor noble estates, urging me to join a fresh, no-ran aristocratic coalition to push back the beastmen. I turned down every single invitation. In the end, I just stopped writing back entirely. These fractured, petty lords couldn't coordinate a real fight. They just bicker over who takes point and fall apart. Going solo was smarter. The real headache was the food supply. My grain stockpiles were getting critically low. Even when the autumn harvest comes in, it won't be enough to feed everyone. Through the winter, the major commercial firms within Norrens had gone under, securing grain from Rima, where Yad was technically on the table. But the conflict had scared off all the traveling merchants. I needed to set up my own firm to export our extra weaponry. Bigland's old blades could pull in some good coin. Weapons are always in high demand across other realms. I just required a reliable partner to handle the trading business. I was actually going to scout the displaced crowds for promising traders right when the butler knocked again. My lord, the holy maiden, Lady Iruna, has arrived. She wasn't on my schedule today. When I caught up with her out in the courtyard, she wasn't sporting her usual white, sacred vestments. Instead, she wore a form-fitting, fringed lavender gown that accentuated her silhouette in a whole new light. Her bare calves swayed playfully beneath the trim. She was beaming. There you are, Linway. Her expression was incredibly warm and sweet, flashing those cute little dimples. Lady Iruna, it's a pleasure. She shot me a playfully critical glare. That bizarre sensation washed over me once more. But given my recent training, I picked up on it way more clearly. Something was subtly messing with my head. Was she pulling some kind of enchantment trick on me? But honestly, what could she want from a guy like me? Didn't I tell you we could drop the formalities? I brought a little treat for you this time. Whatever hex she was casting, I figure I could let it slide. Her smile truly was just that gorgeous. What kind of treat? I secured a massive haul of wheat and a team of clerics to help you survive the cold season. She hesitated. A full supply of enchanted armaments and some griffin hatchlings. My mind went completely blank. Grain to last the winter, healers to care for my people, enchanted gear and young griffins, the absolute bedrock for my very own Griffin Knight division. Just one of these would have been an incredible offering. An involuntary realization suddenly hit me. Honestly, tying the knot with this stunning, open-handed, and seriously loaded lady might actually be a solid move. Seriously, how am I ever going to pay you back? I blurted out. The herbs alone were a total lifesaver, let alone an entire arsenal of enchanted weapons. And griffin cubs? Just a single one of them fetched a whopping 100,000 gold coins at an auction a decade ago, which was the final time the public ever got a shot at one. A breeding pair actually went for north of 200,000. Only the Noran royals had ever successfully raised them on a massive scale. These particular little guys were basically royal bribes, meant to win over Irina. No need to pay me back, she murmured softly. Whatever's mine is going to be yours eventually anyway. I could feel my guard completely dropping. A true noble shouldn't sell out for cheap, but man, jokes aside, I mean it. If there's ever anything you need from me, I'm all in. Right at that moment, the door swung open. Saruka, Yahello, and Reyna all walked in, holding a frosted pastry with tiny lit candles poked into it. Young master, happy birthday, boss. Happy birthday, master. Happy birthday. It had completely slipped my mind that I just turned 18. Irina caught the surprise too. Oh, is it your birthday today? Happy birthday, Linway. The girls' expressions totally changed the second they noticed Irina was there. They had set up this whole celebration so carefully, only for this crasher to blunder straight into the middle of it. Something about her smug grin made them feel like they'd just been totally played by a clever woman. Once the treats were done, I dashed off to check out the baby griffins. As an ice-guide transmigrator, I'd never actually caught sight of one up close. They'd already outgrown typical dogs, even though they were just babies. Their front have sported golden eagle plumage, while lion's coat covered the rear. Plus, their sharp beaks and claws looked pretty lethal. Despite their small size, those feathers felt tough as steel plating. The moment they spotted me, they started beating their wings and screeching a warning. Honestly, they were just too tiny to be intimidating. Totally adorable, if you ask me. Breaking in griffins usually meant dealing with a tedious method of grinding down their feral instincts, unless you happen to possess a monster taming skill. Fortunately, I had Enkyun on my side. Her incredible beast-taming talent had been totally wasted on just breaking in basic horses. These griffins were the perfect match for her abilities. While I was hanging out with the hatchlings, some interesting drama was unfolding back in the chambers. Yuruna had managed to corner Saruko all by herself. She closely scrutinized the young magic prodigy, with a calculating gaze that clearly made Saruka feel uneasy. Saruka snapped a glare back, but that only caused Yuruna to giggle. "Sister Saruka, mind if I address you as such?" Saruka merely grunted in response. She knew Yuruna was after my heart. She'd actually been snooping outside the door. On the exact night Yuruna popped the question, Yuruna started loading Saruka with sweet talk about achieving the rank of Magic Master at such a tender age, modestly labeling herself as just an ordinary, low-ranking priestess who lacked the brains to pick up arcane magic under Aria's guidance. Saruka ended up completely flustered by it all. The admiration felt totally real, and since Yuruna was playing the humble card, there was really no polite way to push back. Then came the ultimate finishing blow. Yuruna clasped Saruka's hands, stared directly in her eyes, and dropped the question. "Sister Saruka, you've got feelings for Linwei too, right?" Saruka's feline ears whirled around like helicopter blades, and her tail practically launched her straight into the air. I totally. So why don't both of us just tie the knot with him?" Saruka's mind completely fried right then. "Hold up. That was actually on the table? You're an absolute prodigy, but you haven't reached the rank of Grand Mage yet. Only a true Grand Mage has the power to shield Lin Wei from harm. You definitely don't want a repeat of what happened last time, right?" Saruka gave a solemn nod. She seriously needed to level up. "Head back to the capital with me tomorrow morning. I'll introduce you to Arya once you become a Grand Mage. After that, nobody will ever dare threaten Lin Wei again, deal?" And just like that, the poor, clueless cat girl got completely played. In Yurina's eyes, Saruka posed the biggest threat to her securing the spot of #1 wife by packing her off to study. By the time Saruka finally returns, Yurina's future kids could already be running errands down the street. Plus, she pulled it off without relying on charm magic at all. Saruka was a master of the mystic arts, so that wouldn't fly anyway, just pure psychological manipulation. Utterly brilliant, yet terrifying. I completely misjudged just how loaded this woman was. 500 wagons of wheat, 10 tons apiece. Plenty to sustain my entire domain for years. 8 young griffins, for priests, and 4 priestesses to tend to my people's wounds. And enchanted weaponry for my troops. A persistent thought kept passing through my mind. Maybe tying the knot with this stunning, filthy rich, and insanely generous woman really was the right move. Sure, she was a bit of a mastermind, but she's a wealthy mastermind who keeps spoiling me with gifts fit for an empire. Honestly, that was a whole different league. Those baby griffins are pretty adorable, aren't they? Yurina's voice chimed in from behind, right as I was messing around with the cubs. Turning around, I expressed my gratitude once more. She had really come through the grain, the weaponry, the beasts, and most crucial of all, holding off the beastmen with nothing but a single word. If not for her, Luca might have been completely wiped out by now. She merely offered a smile. It was clear she was playing the long game here, slowly making me feel more and more obligated to her, until backing out became impossible. Talk about patient. Right then, her status window suddenly materialized right in front of me. Yurina, combat 80. Tactics 198, affection. 80, unique traits, recovery, extrasensory perception. All restorative spells cost 50% less mana. Faith icon. As a worshipped holy maiden, her magical capacity expands gradually, each day from the devotion of the masses. Mana font. Equipped with a ring that stores massive reserves of magical energy. Currently active. I took an involuntary step back. An 80 in combat, that completely topped Ankro, my strongest remaining knight, who sat at a 75. Plus, she was a cleric, capable of endlessly replenishing her own health. Ankro wouldn't last a minute against her in a real brawl. She looked like a fragile, noble girl. But honestly, she could probably wield a battle axe. Way better than most seasoned troops. And that tactics rating of 198, hitting nearly 200, this girl was frighteningly brilliant. If I tied the knot before getting a lot stronger myself, I'd be stuck living completely under her thumb forever. Would it be alright if I stayed the night in Luca? She inquired timidly, looking worried that I might say no. But of course, feel free to stay as long as you like. You're always welcome in Luca. But outside my borders, the lesser nobles were growing anxious. They spotted holy supply caravans rolling into town, realizing I had the full backing of the clergy. Their petty, noble coalition, a dozen barons and 2 viscounts grouped together, allegedly to take on the beastmen, amounted to nothing more than a fractured pack of ego-driven lords. Some desired complete sovereignty. Others remained faithful to the throne, while some just hoped to coast through the mess. A baron named Austin slammed me for passing on the invite. Another noted that if the High Temple was on my side, they needed me now more than ever. Their combined forces couldn't scrape together. Even 5,000 troops, fighting 100,000 beastmen, was total suicide. Someone turned to Fedra. Baron Fedra, weren't you tight with the Luca clan? Can't you talk some sense into him? Fedra let out a tense chuckle. I could try dropping him a line, but Ryan's been gone for years. I'm not sure how much sway I hold over his boy. Naturally, he was bluffing. He didn't want a soul to know that things between us had gone south. He even managed to set a clever trap. If I ignored him, he could just claim I'd gotten too big for my old comrades. Baron Bona chimed in with absolute earnestness. Mail won't cut it. I'll pay a personal visit to Viscount Linway and urge him to head our front against the beastmen. His lineage had loyally served the No-Rans for ages, and he genuinely wanted to join the fray. The chamber fell silent as everyone agreed. If I signed up and brought the divine faction's weight, their little pact would actually carry some punch. The church was a global superpower, after all, holding massive sway across all 3 realms. Divine power had always outranked the authority of kings. Baron Fedra, let's head to Luca straight away. Austin claimed he wouldn't slam the door on his dad's old pal. Fedra cursed under his breath, but his hands were tied. Backing out now would look totally sketchy. Very well, Baron. So Austin and Baron Fedra headed up to Luca's gates, flanked by their security. Austin spent the entire journey plotting out how to build up a proper army. As soon as I signed up with them, the moment my sentries blocked their path at the entrance, Austin immediately tried to pull rank. Do you know who I am? How dare you stop a nobleman? My men grimaced, but didn't budge an inch. They clearly recognized the noble crests, yet their strict orders were to bar entry to everyone. Anchor stepped up and informed them coolly, our master isn't taking appointments today. That completely set Fedra off. Oh, so Linway is too grand to see his own uncle now. Our households used to be incredibly close. Does that count for 0 just because Ryan passed away? He put on such a sob story routine that a few of my guards actually started shifting uneasily. They were clueless about my past with Fedra, and Anchor was a bit stuck on how to handle the drama. Right around then, Urina and I happened to walk out outside. I was giving her a proper send-off, and Saruka had out of nowhere made up her mind to go back and hit the books with Arya. The timing was absolutely brutal for Fedra. His expression completely soured the second he spotted me. Austin dismounted his horse, beaming from ear to ear. Viscount Linway, I am Baron Austin from the New Noble Alliance. The Empire requires our... I cut him short with a gesture. I already gave Luke my refusal. I have no intention of joining your coalition. His grin completely vanished, and he shot Fedra a desperate look for backup. But Fedra kept his head down, trying to stay unseen. Austin pushed on regardless. Hey, your uncle traveled all this way to invite you. In person. Least you could do is show some respect. Uncle? Which uncle? What's his last name? Luca. Honestly, I thought it might be updates regarding one of my dad's actual brothers. Baron Fedra. Fedra's face flushed a deep crimson. He never anticipated me stepping out at that precise second. Then Urina chimed in, moving to my side. Her kind, gentle vibe completely evaporated, replaced by the chilly authority of the Holy Maiden. Baron Fedra, the one who called off the engagement with Linway. Austin's jaw dropped as he gawked at Urina. You're the church's Holy Maiden? I am. Her freezing aura made even Austin recoil. Instinctively. Next, she faced Fedra, who couldn't hide anymore. He stumbled off his mount, babbling out excuses. I never claimed I'd break the wedding pact. It's just that my daughter, Lena, went missing. Urina dismissed this with a shake of her head. Do I really need to detail how you unilaterally ripped up that marriage contract? You were still a noble baron, right? Surely your reputation matters to you. Fedra turned ghostly pale. The church was famous for knowing everything. If Urena had looked into this matter, she possessed proof. No amount of backtracking would save him. Linwei is under the church's wing, Urena announced. He doesn't need your alliance. He'll do just fine without your lot. Full protective wife mode activated. The barons couldn't even squeeze a word in. Austin shot a dirty look at Fedra. This merchant turned lord had totally dragged him into this under false pretenses, playing the we're family card. When he totally torched that bridge ages ago. No shocker I've been dodging their letters. We'll be taking off, then? Austin mumbled, and they all slinked away, totally stripped of their earlier cockiness. Once they bolted, Urena's icy vibe instantly vanished. She gave me this guilty, sorry look, her voice super quiet and meek. I'm so sorry, Linwei. I didn't mean to air that out publicly. I just couldn't stomach them trying to play you. I shook my head. It's chill, nothing to hide. After my dad passed, Fader really did axe the engagement. I know exactly the kind of guy he is. Thanks for having my back. She gave this warm, super content smile. Duh. Whether you're in the right or dead wrong, I'm always going to be in your corner, rooting for you. You can totally lean on me more, you know. I nodded, taking Urena's words to heart. Before heading out, she handed me a small box. Inside was a legit church insignia. With this badge, my trade caravans could waltz in and do business. In both Rima and Yad, an absolute game changer. Noran's was an active war zone where trade had completely tanked, but those other two kingdoms were still pretty solid. Flying the church's flag meant nobody would dare mess with my merchants, and they'd even score some VIP treatment. Thanks, Urena. After racking up so many gifts from her, I felt gutsy enough to pull her in for a quick hug. Her lips curled up into a smirk, clearly stoked that her little charm offensive was paying off. I was totally clueless, but she was already scheming to have an heir. Within the year, a boy to take over Luca, or a girl to step up as the next holy maiden. Just one quick hug, and she's basically picking out baby names. The moment I let go, Saruka bounded right over. Master, me next. I gave her a soft hug as well, then watched the pair of them head off. I sighed. If this kept up, I'd end up totally weak for Urena's warmth. But honestly, she was really sweet, wealthy, mindful of my feelings, and respected my pride. I'd genuinely grown fond of her. Now, I held the church's trade permit, but I desperately needed someone to run the business. I'd already reviewed my original citizens, but nobody fit the bill. Then, while checking the refugee work details, I caught sight of a guy named Will Fry. Combat, 18. Strategy, 79. Loyalty, 40. Special traits, negotiation skills, and a merchant's instinct. Absolutely ideal for the job, except his loyalty was way too low for such a crucial position. So, I set up a little trick. I had some guards hassle him, over the span of a week. Nothing deadly, mind you, but plenty to make his life a living hell. Eventually, his neighbors urged him to report it to Knight Ankro, my right-hand officer. When Will Fry tracked him down, Ankro straight up whipped the guilty guards. Right before his eyes, the beating looked brutal, with blood soaking right through their uniforms. Will Fry wasn't dense. He knew if he let this go too far, those guards would hold a massive grudge. He begged Ankro to hold back. Ankro lowered the whip and offered an apology on their behalf. Then, Ankro dropped the news. The Lord wishes to meet you in person to apologize. Wolfrey's mind practically blew up. A nobleman apologizing to a mere refugee? He was scared stiff it was a setup. He fell to his knees, slamming his head against the dirt. I meant no disrespect. I'm so grateful for everything. He even snatched Anchor's whip and begged to take the hit himself, insisting it had to be his own doing. By the time they brought him to me, he was shaking like a leaf. The second I stood up, he threw himself onto the floor. Lord Linwei, it's all my fault. I kept a totally straight face. How is it your fault those soldiers pushed you around? He just kept bashing his forehead on the ground, insisting he just hadn't worked hard enough. I motioned for Anchor to stop him, before he literally cracked his skull open. Walfrey, relax. I'm not some unreasonable lord. If my soldiers stepped out of line, they'll be punished. Everyone in Luica gets treated completely fairly. Old-timers and newcomers alike. His loyalty jumped to 60. Aluolo, fetch a few silver coins for him. Let's call it compensation for his injuries. His eyes went wide. Silver coins, just for medical expenses? He actually thought, kneeling and groveling makes money. Can I do this a few more times? His loyalty shot to 80. I pressed the coins into his palm and looked him dead in the eye. I think you've got real potential. Come work for me. Ah, the classic playbook. First the stick, then the carrot. Grandfather Edward would have been proud. Walfrey probably never even dreamed. He'd go from getting thrashed by guards to becoming president of the Luica Trading Company. I handed over some serious authority. He could hire laborers under the Luica family banner and request up to 1,000 guards as escorts, at least until he built his own security force. His initial cargo would be straightforward. Thousands of standard-issue longswords, taken out of service from my frontline troops. Once Big Land began crafting weapons with specialized traits. Like armor-piercing, they were still top-notch blades, sure to fetch a great price in Rima. And yet, to top it off, I had the maids whip up tens of thousands of cream jars for export as luxury items, even priced at 10 gold coins a pop. That meant over 100,000 gold in total revenue, and making them cost next to nothing. I passed him a shopping list written on parchment. Most of it consisted of alchemical gear and supplies unique to the Yad Kingdom. Yad was famous for treating foreign traders like garbage, slapping them with brutal export tariffs that killed all profit. But armed with the church's trade pass from Urania, we'd breeze right through. That holy emblem guaranteed every realm would roll out the red carpet, and nobody would dare mess with us. Needless to say, Fry left my office holding his head high. He came from a lineage of merchants. His old man had been the vice president of a massive trading firm before getting ousted in a corporate feud. He'd been reduced to farming, then became a refugee. But now, I'd handed him a shot to get back to what he was born to do, backed by Urania's deep pockets. I could finally build my military back up. I signed up 17,000 sturdy young guys from the displaced crowds and local volunteers. Anchor couldn't handle that massive crowd solo, so I bumped up 4 seasoned sentries, with combat ratings hovering around 70, to step up as squad commanders. 2 weeks slipped by, and Luke was steadily getting his groove back. The stream of refugees was finally thinning out. The peak of the crisis had officially passed. The Noble Alliance completely went silent on me, and honestly, I couldn't care less about their fate. Today, I took a walk down to the Griffin Pens out back, where Cuna had formed an incredible bond with those 8 little cubs. They'd shot up from the size of ordinary hounds to something resembling massive golden retrievers. Man, these little monsters were such fussy eaters, though, demanding at least 2 short-tailed chickens per feeding, and eating 3 or 4 times a day. Even with over 2,000 birds stocked at the manor, I was still constantly buying out local villagers, just to keep up. Master, you're actually here. Cuna cheered, riding up on one of them. The moment it spotted me, it actually dipped its eagle head, asking for a scratch. Those coarse, warm feathers felt surprisingly good. Can it take flight yet? She gestured to her own mount and 2 others nearby. Yep, these 3 are already airborne. The remaining 5 shouldn't be too far behind. Sliding down, she gave its neck a reassuring pat. Show him what you've got. With a piercing screech, the griffin launched straight into the heavens, slicing through the skies at a breathtaking pace. Their endurance was absolutely phenomenal. They could fly a whole day straight without breaking a sweat. Once they reached maturity, outfitted in anti-magic plating and carrying my top-tier knights, they'll be my ultimate secret weapon on any battlefield. They'd be way more devastating than heavy cavalry. Sure, you can halt a cavalry charge with spear walls, but against a fully armored griffin, unless you pierce right through its wings, which are tough as steel on an adult, there's no stopping them. Plus, unlike standard warhorses, griffins are lethal combatants in their own right. Just as my merchant firm was launching, events were unfolding in Rima that I was completely oblivious to. Princess Einware had been driving herself to the brink ever since our clash at George Fortress. All those years ago, she'd reached high-tier mage status at a mere 20 years old, perfectly mastering 3 distinct branches of elemental magic. On top of that, she practiced her blade skills under the finest sword saint in Rima, while studying alchemy under a succubus mentor. And why? Because she couldn't let go of how I'd totally humiliated her. Plus the fact that I'd apparently teased her about her hands feeling soft. Yeah, she'd been nursing that grudge for ages. Her skills were so insane that Rima's own wizard masters and archmages confessed they had nothing left to teach her. They suggested she go track down Arya in No Rands, given that Arya only valued raw capability, not where someone was from. Arya had only ever mentored 3 pupils in her lifetime. 2 became archmages, while the last one was hailed as a once-in-a-millennium prodigy, but with No Rands currently in total chaos, and the beastmen occupying the bulk of the realm. Her father strictly forbade her from going. The funny twist happened while she was strolling through Rima's capital city and caught sight of a deeply familiar coat of arms, a soaring blue bird emblazoned on a trader's flag. My own family's colors. She was absolutely stunned. No Rands was going up in flames. Yet I was out here deploying merchants to cut deals. She stormed right into the winter trading company, where Will Fry was cheerfully pitching cosmetic cream to the chief executive. The second the boss caught sight of the princess, he frantically leaped to his feet. Will Fry kept his cool, standing for both Luika and the church. He offered a polite nod and nothing more. Enware glared at him, barely hiding her spite. Your master is Lin Wei, isn't he? Right then, Fry got a really bad vibe. Judging by the way the princess looked, he instantly jumped to the conclusion. My boss totally pumped and dumped her. Deep down, he was seriously impressed. A foreign princess? His lord was an absolute legend among men. When she realized the trading company was selling cream, she stared at the white, slightly yellowish goop, and her face suddenly flushed red for some reason, out of pure pettiness. She tried to slap the highest possible tax on Will Fry's inventory. The winter trading company's head panicked. Your Highness, we can't do that. This merchant holds a church trade permit. Under Rama law, they qualify for the lowest rates. Anware's face contorted. Even royalty couldn't mess with the church. She backed off. Fine. Go by the book. Meanwhile, Will Fry was secretly giving me a mental thumbs up. Not only was his master tight with a holy maiden, but he even had a foreign princess throwing tantrums. An absolute role model for guys everywhere. While Noran's was burning, Luika remained an isolated sanctuary, peaceful and calm. My army had expanded to 20,000 troops. 3,000 were battle-scarred veterans, while the rest were fresh recruits training hard. As one of my top 2 knights, Ankro was swamped, hardly finding the time to hit the tavern anymore. I should probably knight Diction posthumously. Yet he lacked any kin, with no heir to inherit his legacy. The noble rank merely added fancier engravings to a headstone that no soul visited, save for Anchor. One evening, following a grueling day, Anchor splashed fruit wine over Uxion's resting place, acting as though his old pal could still enjoy a drink. He lingered there in silence, then walked away without a backward glance. There was no need to. Uxion's memory would remain alive within his heart forever. Your tea, master. Reyna placed a mug of black tea onto my desk. Area's concealment. Incantation had shattered during the clash with Nether's forces, though that didn't really matter by now. Zillick had far bigger messes to handle than hunting down my dragon girl. Lately, though, I noticed Reyna acting pretty flustered. Her scales did odd things whenever her eyes met mine. It seemed my intense training was boosting my charm. Reviewing my status screen, combat was at 25, while strategy hit 80 and kept on rising. I stole a glance at Reyna, realizing just how handy another vial of dragon blood would turn out to be. Incredible material. It maxed out stamina and combat attributes. Still, I couldn't exactly ask her to bleed for my sake, without some solid justification. A sudden rap at the door cut us short. The house steward brought in a missive, stamped with the Simon House coat of arms. Duke Simon. Wasn't he supposed to be cornered with Zillick out on the flats? What business did he have writing to me? The text was packed with heavy flattery and sweet talk, mentioning offhandedly that Sovereign Zillick held me in high regard. They requested my assistance in reclaiming the fallen lands. Word of my connection to the clergy had obviously reached their ears, but the genuine shocker concerned Yahello. Duke Simon declared himself to be her father, demanding her return to the Simon household, and offering her the renowned Simon family name, and even naming her as his heir. He suggested that if I wed Yahello, our kids would get total support from the royals and the left-wing faction. He even had the nerve to add that Yahello could just be a concubine if I preferred a different woman as my main wife. I knew exactly who he had in mind. I nearly laughed in his face. I known all along that Yahello's dad was some big noble in the left faction, but Duke Simon himself? The guy who kicked Yahello's mother out, back when she was just a common maid crawling back. Clearly, because all his legitimate heirs must have been wiped out when the Beastmen sacked the capital. What a convenient time, too. Suddenly remember his cast-off daughter. It was a totally transparent scheme. They were feeling desperate, with the Beastmen holding the capital and most of the wealthy lands. The nobles stuck with Zillick had nothing left. If they could use me to reach the church, it might be their only shot at turning the tables. They knew my territory was on a key route, yet it stayed completely untouched. That was obviously the church's doing. Reyna, go bring me Yahello. When she showed up, still dusty from working with the elf maids, I was blunt. Yahello, we've located your father. Oh, she replied, monotone. Aren't you even curious who he is? She shook her head without skipping a beat. I don't care. My home is in Luca territory. I want to stay by your side forever. I sighed and tossed the letter into the bin. Then stay by my side forever it is. That vibrant, Twinkling happiness in her gaze brought me a sense of profound, silent serenity. The beast men had been occupying the capital for a good while by then. Roughly 2/3 of the locals were just gone, either slaughtered or enslaved. Pretty much only priests, wizards, and alchemists were left alone. Anyone brave enough to fight back got their head chopped off. Things had finally quieted down, but man, it was a pretty bleak kind of stability. Meanwhile, over at the Magic Academy, Saruka could tell that Arya was feeling off. Her mentor kept fidgeting with her tea, picking it up and setting it down, with her gaze constantly wandering toward the window, where the cries of the suffering townsfolk echoed inside. Honestly, as a grand mage and a white elf, Arya wasn't exactly bound to rescue the people of Noran. Her old pupil had merely requested that she watch the kingdom's ultimate rise and fall, not get involved. Sure, she could offer refuge to those escaping to the academy grounds, but that was about it. It's not like an elf could easily spearhead a human uprising. And let's be real, Noran's ruling class had been totally corrupt for ages, so maybe a major shakeup was overdue. She let out a sigh, letting all her anxieties drift away. Just then, a staff member came by with some updates. An advanced spellcaster was looking to study under Arya. Turns out it was Princess Einweir from Rima. She had traveled all this way, and she was barely 20 years old. Yet, she already held an elite mage rank. Seriously mind-blowing by regular standards. The moment Einweir laid eyes on Arya, even she was completely awestruck by the Grand Mage's gorgeous looks. She gave a proper, respectful introduction and pleaded to be taken in. Arya stepped closer, inspected the girl's hands, which were calloused from sword practice, and delivered her decision right then and there. You're biting off more than you can chew. Blades, alchemy, and sorcery. Even a prodigy can't master all three paths. At this pace, you could hit Magic Master in 2 decades, but Grand Mage will stay out of reach. Your gifts are way better suited for alchemy and swordsmanship. Just head home. You don't fit my needs. I've been totally stonewalled. Shot down, just like that after a single introduction. She flat out refused to go. I'm not quitting. I'm staying right here until you change your stance. Saruka felt sorry for her and tried to ease her mind, clarifying that Ario was typically mild-mannered, yet completely stubborn regarding sorcery judgments. Elwyn could sense the immense, overwhelming mana pouring right out of Saruka, dwarfing her own. So this was the legendary prodigy, Ario's 3rd disciple. She had anticipated a Noran's local, not a beastfolk feline girl. Neither woman realized that they shared a connection to the exact same guy. Had they known, their little chat definitely wouldn't have been this pleasant. Man, Fry made it back way quicker than expected. A full circuit to Yad and Ryman usually took upwards of 2 months, yet he departed in summer and returned before autumn even wrapped up. The church's commercial permit made everything a breeze. Bottom-tier customs fees and 0 holdups at the checkpoints. He purposefully brought only 10,000 cream containers, keeping inventory low to inflate the market value. Every single unit fetched 100 gold pieces, tenfold what we standardly charge back in Norans. Even with that steep markup, buyers were scrambling for it. Granted, the valuation would tank once we scaled up manufacturing, but the current margins were absolutely insane, raking in 1 million gold just from cream sales. Those 5,200 swords went for 70 gold apiece. That's 20 over my baseline goal of 50. Plus, he handed out 200 blades as freebies to butter up our key trading partners, following my orders to AT. On top of that, he secured 3,000 warhorses, just like I asked. I had the butler count out 1,000 gold pieces and pass the heavy sack over to Fry. Awesome work. Here's your bonus. He dropped straight to his knees in gratitude. With that kind of cash, his loyalty maxed out at 100. He could easily buy a place in Lucca and settle down. I decided to stop dealing in weapons from here on out. The cream profits completely blew everything else away, and the leftover swords could just be used as practice. Gear, after all the bills, taxes, and buying. The horses, I pocketed around 500,000 gold. Not too shabby, but man, it burned up fast. I ordered brand new stables built for those 3,000 mounts, seeing as our old barns could only fit 1,000. I also hired builders to construct a standalone alchemy lab, far from the castle. Alchemy trials can go sideways, and I really didn't want to blast leveling my own home. The moment the shop was up, little Nashia practically moved in. The elf girl was totally hooked, devouring the alchemy manuals Fry had brought back. Her success rate was honestly insane. She hardly wasted a single ingredient. She was a total natural. Today, she showed off her very first breakthrough. 100 strength potions. She explained it all with a completely straight, innocent face. These should temporarily double a person's physical might. Though the stronger the user already is, the milder the boost. As for the side effects, well, the lab might spit the dust, but it probably won't be nearly that bad for humans. Probably just 3 days of throwing up and diarrhea, completely losing their appetite. I stared at this cute little girl, so casually bringing up dead rodents, making my skin crawl. She glanced up at me with such innocent eyes, just waiting to be praised. I gave her head a little pat, and she happily hugged my leg. The rest of the elf helpers lined up for head pats as well. I offered 5 silver coins to any brave soul who was willing to test out the tonics, promising 50 gold coins to their next of kin. If things went south, a handful of folks stepped right up. A couple of old-timers past their prime, and a woodsman who'd lost a leg in a bad mishap. They figured that if they kicked the bucket, their families would at least be set for a long time. The one-legged hunter took the first gulp. His face flushed bright crimson, as a sudden surge of raw power rushed through him. Then, to absolutely everyone's shock, he tossed aside his crutch and balanced perfectly on his solitary leg. The elderly men turned flushed and red-faced too, looking as if they had boundless stamina. The bruise definitely did the trick. Now we just had to hold tight and see if the side effect were truly as minor as Nashia claimed, or as fatal as those mice seemed to hint. The alchemy test turned out to be a total win. Nobody had died after 3 days went by. The test subjects just dealt with some vomiting and diarrhea, and then they were totally fine. I kept sending guards to check in on them every day, all through the winter season. Not a single long-term complication popped up. Nashia's enhancement elixirs were finally ready for actual deployment. From what I could gather, each dose boosted a soldier's combat power rating by roughly 20 points for a single day. Out on the battlefield, that kind of advantage could be a total game changer, even if the aftermath was pretty brutal. Then I'd save them for a total emergency. 2 days after the winter's first snow, a familiar, elegant church carriage rolled up to Luica. Irina stepped out, bundled up in a thick white coat. Her eyes completely lit up the second she spotted me. She checked me out and looked pretty pleased. I bulked up quite a bit from all the training, making my face sharper and my build way sturdier. As she was climbing down from the carriage, she faked a trip and tumbled straight into my arms. Even through her heavy coat, I could feel my own heart starting to race. The white-armored guards and my men all politely looked away. After holding her for a moment, I awkwardly asked if she was doing okay. She shot me a helpless little glance. Thanks, Linwei. I nearly made a total fool of myself. Neither of us really wanted to let go of the warmth. But since everyone was watching, we broke apart. She brought along more gifts. Griffin armor forged from insulated steel, and thunder meteorite iron. It was top-tier defensive gear, against both magical and physical strikes. Just another drop from the endless fortune of my wealthy lady. Still, I couldn't help but wonder. She could have easily just sent a messenger with this. Did she seriously need to travel in person during winter? Turns out my hunch was right. She intended to stay for the entire season. Inside the cozy castle, Yahello served us tea with a polite, yet slightly bitter expression. The young maid wasn't thrilled about how close Irina and I were getting, but she held her tongue. She knew Irina, as Lady of Luica, was the logical choice. The moment we were left alone with our tea, Irina caught me off guard with a question. Linwei, do you recall our very first meeting? For sure. It was the day you healed me. I could never forget that. She gave a soft laugh, shaking her head. Nope, guess again. Think a little harder. Get it right, and there's a prize in it for you. I was totally confused. That was definitely our first encounter, right? Yet, her affection meter toward me had jumped from 80 to 90 since we last spoke. Something was fueling her deep emotions, and I just couldn't wrap my head around it. She was stunning, incredibly powerful, and loaded. Why was she so crazy about me? Can I get a little hint? She immediately pouted, her eyes tearing up. You seriously forgot? I totally panicked. I'm so sorry. It'll come back to me, just give me a sec. I completely missed the tiny smirk she tried to hide. A decade ago, right outside the Magic Academy. 10 years back, the memories slowly began to resurface. My father, Ryan, had brought me to the Magic Academy one afternoon, hoping I'd be able to master magic. The instructor had evaluated me and informed my dad, with great regret, that I possessed absolutely zero talent for it. Did I actually cross paths with Irina there that day? Honestly, my father, Ryan, had been way more crushed by the news than I was. During that day at the Magic Academy, I had only recently transmigrated into this world, and I was pretty content just being a nobleman's kid, getting 3 square meals a day, reading history books, and having Yahello and the headmaid handle every little thing for me. I didn't even unlock my power to view people's status windows until several years down the line, which is exactly why I couldn't achieve all that much before finally inheriting the barony. The memory was pretty ancient, but it all flooded back. Later that day, right after finding out I lacked any magical talent, I spotted a girl curled up near the academy gates, sobbing. My heart really went out to her, so I handed her a shimmering gemstone necklace, a birthday present my dad had given me. I told her she was gorgeous and needed to cheer up, insisting that no matter how rough life gets, you just got to keep smiling through it. I had absolutely no clue that one tiny good deed would eventually save my skin. Flash forward years, and Urena slipped that very necklace out from under her shirt. It looked pretty faded, yet perfectly taken care of. Do you remember this? Yeah, I do. I replied, my tone softening up completely in spite of myself. She explained how her mom, who used to be the Holy Maiden and a legendary healer, had suddenly passed away from a brief sickness. The bitter irony of a master healer dying from an illness definitely wasn't lost on her. At such a tender age, she was forced to drop out of the Magic Academy and head straight back to the church to fill her mother's shoes. That was the exact day our paths crossed. I sat down right next to her and let her rest against my shoulder. Words completely failed me, so I just stayed close, which seemed to do the trick. Once we wrapped up chatting, I headed off to take care of some documents for Shalais. What I didn't realize at the time was that Urena went straight over to the Great Hall, where Elialu and Reina happened to be laundering my sheets. She cut straight to the chase with Elialu. Lin Wei brought up the Simon household to you, didn't he? Don't you want to return and live as a duke's daughter? Elialu shook her head without a single second thought. I only ever want to remain by my young master's side. If the former master hadn't offered shelter to my mother, I'd be a goner. I couldn't care less about the Simon title. I'm simply Elialu. Right then, Urena popped the real question. Are you in a Lin Wei? Yet, Elialu didn't freak out the way Saruka had. Duh, of course I like him, she replied calmly. I love him back then, I love him right now, and he'll always be my absolute favorite. Urena nodded. If I end up as Luca's lady, I'll let you be his concubine. Belial went completely rigid for a second, before a flash of pure joy lit up her eyes. She always knew I'd tie the knot with someone. She was just terrified of getting dumped aside later. All she truly desired was to stay close to me. That was plenty. Thank you, Miss Urena. This time around, she dropped the Holy Maiden title entirely. Urena then shifted her gaze to Reina, whose tail was already wagging like crazy. You're the White Enchantress, right? Reina blushed, nodding. If I take the title of Luca's lady, you could become Lin Wei's concubine as well. What do you think? Reina's tail practically went into overdrive. Right then and there, the trio of girls struck a silent deal. They all understood I'd eventually need a primary wife, and some random woman might not be so accommodating. Urena was giving them a lock on their spots. By my side with her full approval, they could legally be a part of my life, and maybe even start a family. Weighing that against the gamble of whatever stranger might show up, Urena was hands down their safest bet. This girl's tactical gameplay was honestly terrifying. She'd already packed off Saruka, her biggest competitor for the main wife spot, back to her magic studies, and now she'd completely locked down the loyalty of every other girl around me by promising them exactly what they craved. Meanwhile, I was just chilling in my study handling paperwork, totally clueless about all. The wealthy lady's schemes were miles ahead of my own. The griffins seemed way more spirited during the winter, after months of solid feeding. Every single one of the 8 was now as big as a calf. Their plumage was glossy, their bills were razor-sharp, and their talons had grown noticeably thicker. They had officially hit their adolescent phase. Come next winter, they'd be fully grown adults. Matching the size of elephants, griffins could live past 70 years. Yet it took just a couple of years to reach maturity. With plenty of food, they'd start mating as well. I had been taking them out for a spin lately, gliding straight through the clouds, since my combat stats were finally solid enough to keep me from slipping off. I could genuinely relish the blast of the wind. From way up there at that altitude, the entire Rime region was in plain view. A torrent of a river cutting below, the domains of the beast folk glinting on the distant horizon, and over to the left, a colossal, snow-peaked mountain range. They were so steep that only winged creatures could ever scale them. Naturally, my curiosity got the upper hand. I picked up some pub gossip, claiming the flip side was beast folk territory, or maybe home to a dragon hoarding its loot. I steered the griffin right over the summits. 0 dragons, just endless, twisting ridges, sprinkled with tiny outposts. Yurt-style tents with smoking fires. Clans of lizard folk were dotted across the lowlands like stars in the sky. I already ruled around 200 lizard folk in my own lands, and I've been mulling over how to boost those numbers. But marching my forces across those peaks was a no-go, and crafting vessels for the Rima River was just as unrealistic, unless we had something like the beast folks' water rhinos. I shelved that piece of intel for a rainy day. Down the road, once Luika grew powerful enough, those highlands would belong to me. The moment I touched down, Urino was waiting to chew me out. Hey, you went airborne again. Just look at you. The dampness in your hair literally froze up there. She softly wiped the frost crystals from my head, her gaze blending anxiety with affection. She'd been staying in Luka for 2 months by now. Winter was halfway through, and once the snow thawed, she would likely move on. I had grown quite accustomed to her presence. The prospect of her departure left me feeling rather empty, whether I cared to acknowledge it or not. I was genuinely falling for her. She clasped my icy hands within her warm palms, and that warmth seemed to penetrate far deeper than just my fingertips. Miles away, Zillik and his aristocrats were enduring a brutal winter, marooned inside the Rima forest, alongside 300,000 soldiers and civilians. Their logistics lines from the capital had been completely severed by the beastmen. Starvation was rampant. The monarch who once governed the realm was now essentially nothing more than a displaced person. Duke Simon was particularly frantic. Every single one of his sons was gone, slaughtered when the beastmen pillaged the capital. His sole remaining offspring was Yahello, who had utterly ignored his correspondence. Too elderly and exhausted to sire any more heirs, he pinned his final expectations on her, wielding the Simon lineage forward by wedding me. Yet she preferred to remain my servant girl, over reclaiming her title as a duke's daughter. Simon pitched a plot to Zillik. We circulate whispers throughout Luika territory. That Lin Wei is treacherous to the throne. A vast number of his people still maintain a profound allegiance to the crown. It's hardwired into their minds. If we can just stir up enough doubt, the backlash from his very own subjects will make him cave, dragging the church's support along with him. Zillik gave a grim nod. They were fresh out of options, lacking any siege weapons. Reclaiming any strongholds by brute force was impossible. Mind games were the only weapon they had left. Norl had been running the old Luka territory flawlessly. He'd successfully reclaimed all the mining operations that had previously been leased out, and everything was finally heading in the right direction. He could see that Noran's was completely falling apart under Ziluk's utterly useless leadership, and he figured I would break away and declare independence soon. He truly respected my capabilities, my eye for talent, and my blueprint for future growth. The only thing I lacked was raw individual combat power. Lately, a few agitators had started whispering rumors around Old Luka, claiming I was disloyal to the crown. Obviously, the royals were trying to turn my own followers against me, but Norris shut that down instantly. He had the ringleaders dragged out into the open and had their limbs broken right before everyone's eyes. He barked at the gathered crowd. If you don't trust Lord Lin Wei, the gates are wide open, but never forget who fed you fine white bread instead of that black garbage. Whoever wants to go look for the king out in the wild, be my guest. I won't stop you. Not a single soul uttered another word after that. Over in New Luika, the plot was even more of a joke. The spies sent to spread those lies were busted by my own citizens and hauled straight to my estate. My people had seen me stand atop the ramparts, fighting off the beastman horde. Right alongside them, they loved me with all their hearts. It didn't matter to them if I crowned myself king. Honestly, they couldn't care less. As the winter chill began to fade, I caught myself gazing out the window, feeling a strange wave of blues wash over me. This whole time with Urina had been absolute bliss. She stayed right by my side day and night. The girl even picked up cooking just for me, learning the ropes at a terrifyingly fast pace. Within a month, she knew my exact preferences. I could tell Alilu and Reina genuinely took a liking to her as well, since they were always hanging out. Yet, whenever Urina dropped by to see me, those two would conveniently make themselves scarce. Late one evening, I caught the familiar sound of her pacing down the hall. Lin Wei, are you still up? I swung the door open. There she stood in a lightweight nightgown, clutching a pair of blue, hand-knitted mittens she had just finished. I made these for you. They're a bit rough, but I hope you like them. Winter only had about a month left, meaning they wouldn't see much use for very long. But the sheer affection woven into them meant the world to me. As I pulled them on, they were still warm from her touch. Thanks, Urina. I love them. Her eyes crinkled into sweet smiles. Not once during these months in Luka had she used her charm magic on me. Everything I was feeling right now was 100% real. I'm parched. Mind if I come in for a drink? Instinctively, I stepped aside. She poured herself some water, drinking straight from my glass without a second thought, before strolling over to the window. The night was dead silent, save for the bugs buzzing out in the dark. Suddenly, a spark ignited deep within my soul. This sudden, intense urge hit me to spend my whole life right beside her. She turned around, her gaze softening, brimming with emotions she could barely keep in. Linwei, the moon is gorgeous tonight, isn't it? I stepped up beside her. Yeah, it really is. We stood there in quiet, just locking eyes. Urina, about what you mentioned earlier, is that offer still on the table? Her heart skipped a beat. What offer? I don't recall. For all her brilliant mind and plots, she was still just a girl who'd never fallen in love. Her cool exterior totally crumbled, replaced by something raw and completely real. I went over to my bedside nightstand and grabbed a ring, the sole inheritance my mother left behind for me. I've been holding on to it all this time, and tonight it finally found its purpose. Dropping to one knee, I kissed the back of her hand. Miss Urina, will you marry me? Yes, I will. Urina's eyes filled with tears, despite all her calculating and bold confidence. Right then, she was just a regular girl, getting proposed to by the guy she loved. Gently, I slipped the ring onto her left hand. A massive weight lifted from my chest like a drifting leaf, at last settling right where it belonged. That smile of hers, those dimples, they made me feel completely intoxicated. Outside, a shooting star streaked through the sky. The twin crimson moons seemed to align perfectly, casting their soft glow over the window ledge. Come morning, Urina tenderly helped me get dressed, her eyes calm and serene. They say, a boy truly becomes a man when he is ready to take responsibility for another person's entire life. After all my time spent in this world, I finally felt like I truly had a place here. As she buttoned up my shirt, I grabbed her hand. From this moment on, you're the lady of Luca. She blushed, asking, when do we break the news? Whenever you're ready. She playfully poked my forehead with her finger. I'll inform the bishops the second I get back. So, we made our engagement official. I fully got the implications, though. Once word got out to the public, I'd be branded as part of the church for good. Anyone looking to pick a fight with me would have to brave the Holy Maiden's wrath. If we ever ended up having a daughter, she'd pretty much be guaranteed to be the next Holy Maiden. But it also meant I couldn't go around invading other lands. The church's neutrality relied on centuries of pure trust. On the bright side, both my territories would get priority. Protection from the white-armored guards and priests, which was going to skyrocket our development. The trade-off was crystal clear. I couldn't attack anyone, but absolutely nobody would dare mess with me. And if I ever became powerful enough down the line, I could always pull the strings using proxies. As long as my name wasn't directly tied to it, that'd do the trick. Eluelo and Reina could totally tell. Something was up with me. That morning, they knew exactly what went down, but since they'd already settled things with Urina, they weren't sweating it at all. In fact, they were actually hyped for their own turns. Right after Urina bore the firstborn to lock down an heir, I was in such a killer mood that I handed out a silver coin to every single soul in the manor and the entire army, along with a half day off. Some 20-odd thousand silver coins only amounted to about 2,000 gold. Pocket change to me. Spreading the joy was worth every single penny. The maids erupted in cheers, and the soldiers roared their approval. Winter came to a swift end. Urina had been incredibly proactive during those final weeks, right up until it was time to head out for her springtime duties. Church sermons and various charity work. Our farewell was bittersweet. She hugged me tightly and whispered, "Drop me a line if you miss me." Gently stroking her hair, I replied, "Stay safe on the road." Once her carriage finally rolled out of sight, my heart felt strangely hollow. Word of our engagement spread like wildfire, striking everyone like a total thunderbolt. Countless young aristocrats throughout Rima and Yad, who had dreamed of winning the Holy Maiden's heart, were utterly crushed by a viscount from a crumbling kingdom. Some even swore to challenge me, just to prove they were more worthy. If they only knew, she'd actually been the one chasing me the whole time. Over at the Magic Academy, Arya sipped her tea and raised an eyebrow upon hearing the news. She felt blindsided and a little frustrated. On Saruka's behalf, her foolish student had gone all the way to Luca and still managed to get outmaneuvered. To Arya, Saruka should have rightfully been the primary wife. Now, she'd likely just end up as a concubine. Fortunately, Saruka was currently buried in the library, deep in her magic studies, and hadn't caught wind of it yet. When she finally does find out, well, there will probably be tears. A whole lot of them. Meanwhile, far away, Zillik was losing his mind all over again. His grand plot to turn my people against me had completely backfired. The winter had been absolutely brutal for them. 40,000 civilians froze to death. Hundreds of royal guards perished. And even the king himself resorted to eating plain meals. Plain old white bread, no meat. Once he caught wind of my engagement to Urania, he absolutely blew a fuse and must have been kicking himself. If he hadn't tried to steal Reina away from me, I'd likely still be a faithful subject. But he couldn't reveal the actual reason behind my rebellion against the crown. And now he was stressing that I'd tip off Urania about what he'd pulled off, which would totally bring the church's wrath down on him. He had no choice but to focus on building a new capital, while praying his people could make it through another winter. Duke Simon was in an even worse state mentally. Every single one of his kids was dead except Alilu, and she preferred being my maid over his daughter. So he sat in his high chair, a duke on paper, yet left with absolutely nothing to his name. Meanwhile, over at the Magic Academy, Amor had been hanging around for a bit. Arya still wouldn't take her on as an official student, though she didn't ban her from studying there either. The place welcomed any dedicated mage with open arms, lacking an actual mentor. Anwar ended up bonding with Saruka instead. They became genuine pals, chatting about pretty much everything. Anwar would swap stories about Rima's high society and customs, while Saruka coached her through her magic snags. Saruka's magical talent spanned multiple elements, meaning she could teach Einwer a whole lot. Neither of them had a clue about the other's link to me. One afternoon, they were grabbing some lunch together in the dining hall. Saruka kept dumping all the meat onto Einwer's plate. The cat girl practically lived on meat, whereas the princess watched her diet strictly. They were hitting it off beautifully, until chatter from a neighboring table caught their attention. Yo, did you hear? The Holy Maiden just got hitched to some lord from Noran's. For real? With Noran's completely going down the drain? Yet she chose one of their aristocrats anyway. What's his name again? Something like Luica? Pretty sure you mean Linway Luica, the legendary viscount who locked down the Rima royals. That's him. Saruka's spoon clattered straight to the floor. For a split second, she thought her ears were playing tricks on her. The bishops definitely caught it. Urania had been in absolute high spirits. Ever since she got back from Luca, there was just a new vibe about her. Less of that girlish innocence, more of a womanly charm. She was cheerfully humming tunes, while heading to the next church function, right when a white armored guard dropped the news that Saruka was there to see her. Honestly, she saw this coming. The cat girl had finally caught wind of the gossip. Saruka was waiting in the lounge, her tail twitching restlessly back and forth. Her face looked dead calm, but a storm was brewing in her eyes. She was there to get some answers. But Urania was playing on a completely different level. Before Saruka could even open her mouth, Urania darted over with a massive, beaming smile, tightly grabbed her hands, and gushed about how terribly she'd missed her big sister. Saruka's brain completely short-circuited. She totally forgot what she even came to say. Every single time Saruka tried to bring up the betrothal, Urania immediately cut her off, offering her those special, mana-boosting berries instead. She'd ask if they tasted good, shifting the topic with flawless timing. And then came the absolute knockout blow. Sister Saruka, when are you going to marry Linway? That way, we can all stay together forever. Why don't you get engaged to him too? Saruka's fury vanished in an instant. Get engaged to Master? For real. Duh. You know I adore you, sis. I just want us all to stay with Linway for good. That poor cat girl got totally outplayed once again. It hadn't even crossed her mind to contend for the spot of first wife. All she wanted was to be close to me. If sharing with Urania meant sticking by my side, that worked for her. Her tail began wagging happily. Talk about mission accomplished for Urania. But you gotta reach Grand Mage status first, sis. Then you won't ever have to leave Linway. Same old trick, same exact outcome. Saruka nodded with total seriousness. She really did need to level up her power. Maybe she could even move Arya into the Luca territory down the road, so her favorite people could be together. Since you're already around, give me a hand with these charity sermons, Urania requested with a sweet smile. And the defenseless cat girl went along without any fuss. Winter soon gave way to spring. Wolfred set out yet again with another batch of cream, except this time as a married guy. He had tied the knot with a local over the winter, and built a proper home using the gold I'd paid him. He wasn't considered a refugee anymore. He actually had a real life now. The new city walls were shaping up beautifully. They were broader and sturdier than the old defenses, outfitted with crossbows, set up to cover the entirety of the Rama River. Lofty arrow towers lined the fortifications, completely prepped for archers, or mages to unleash absolute devastation from above. Standing atop those ramparts, I could hear the river churning below. The fresh settlement had expanded big time. Mind you, the sheer influx of refugees made it feel pretty packed. That gave me an idea. Past the mountains and over the river, I had spotted those lizard folk, living in the lush valleys. If I managed to annex that territory, I'd have the space to expand and get way more powerful. The Real catch was getting over the Rama River. It's not like I could transport a whole army using just 8 griffins. Way too slow. What I really needed were shipwrights. With a crowd of refugees this big, odds are someone in the mix knows how to craft a vessel. And hey, if I struck out, well, I could always send a message to my fiancée. Irina had a knack for sorting out pretty much anything. Honestly, I'm totally fine with it by now. There's zero shame in a guy leaning on his lady for backup. On top of that, everything I create will pass down to our kids in the end.